Christine, you're ready to call the order. I'm letting it.
Okay, so we'll call the meeting to order at 9:36. Welcome everyone this morning. Looks like we're going to have a lot of company. That makes you all very small. Chris has presented, Chris has prepared a presentation to sort of go over our overall proposal. I need more coffee. But I wanted to start by just saying, I think that our goal should be today is to review it all, talk about it all as much as anyone wants to. But we really need to kind of stay focused on our decision making, I think. And what we need to do today is make enough sort of overarching decisions so that we can present to staff and the community what the plan will look like so that they can make decisions themselves, whether or not they're comfortable returning or not. Because then after we get those commitments, we can drill down the details on some more fine tuning and then those sorts of things. I think we have to be detailed enough so that people have can make an educated decision for themselves. But without knowing exactly who's coming back is hard to make all the details at this point. So that's just sort of an overview. Chris, do you have anything you want to add to that?
No, I think that sums it up quite well. We need to be making decisions. We need to move on. It's we're starting August soon, and I know that we need to get boots on the ground, for lack of a better term, get staff in the building so that they can begin the hard work. They definitely will need time to adjust and to make plans. And while some of them have seen some of the portions of the proposal, there's a lot of work that still has yet to be done. And we're looking at the 10,000 foot view. If we can get that done, and we brought it down a little bit to that 5,000 foot view, if we can get some decisions made at that level, then the rest of the more granular work that needs to be done by staff can begin.
Okay, so do you want to go through your presentation?
Sure. Scott, do you want me to screen share?
Yeah, let me just make it a host.
Can I just say that thank you so much for all of the work that you guys have been doing. I know you guys have been working and talking and doing so much behind the scenes, and we are really grateful. We know that you guys looked at a ton of data and stuff going on around the state and the country, and we're really super grateful for it, for all the work.
Well,
Yeah, I'm not sure Chris has slept yet.
Yeah. Well, there's been a lot of pieces.
Not that you look like you haven't slept. That's not what she meant.
Yeah.
That's not what
That face to radio. No. But no, there's been a lot of people touching this plan in a lot of different ways and a lot of different parts. And so it's been my job to kind of bring it all together. And we've had a great committee with some wonderful feedback, starting with the SAU, but then the Nottingham group too, which has been wonderful.
Mm-hmm.
So am I the host yet?
Bar.
All right. So let's.
Which means you got to keep your eye in the waiting room too for Sue.
That's going to be a challenge.
I know.
I'll ask her to text me when she joins so that.
No. You could just allow me to screen share.
Yeah.
If you're the host, you should be able to screen share, Mr. Souza.
No, I know that. I'm just.
Oh,
If he made me a co-host, then he could actually still do the
co-host.
Like on
And
the
is this the midday show?
I have
No,
4
the
people in
early
the waiting room. And I'm going to admit all.
Mr. Souza, now that you're the host, if you want to make me a co-host, I will help with the waiting room.
Awesome. You are a rock star. And it doesn't give you the option to co-host on this one. All right. So are you seeing my screen?
Yes.
Yes.
Okay, I apologize. It's hard for me to tell. All right. So this presentation is really just a loose outline of some of the, of the 25-page document that the school board had gotten ahead of time. But this outlines at least the nuts and bolts of the presentation and the information needed. So this was created and edited, as I mentioned, by a lot of different folks. They had a lot of hands and a lot of input from different districts as well as the state. What we took was we had some specific goals in mind, and then looking at the state feedback and their guidance document, trying to match everything together. And this includes not only just teachers that were on the committee, but also transportation company, food service, etc. Please stop me along the way if you have any questions. And I certainly want to let folks know that this is by nature of the situation we're in, a dynamic document, that this plan may change, that we know that the COVID-19 virus is going to shift, and we need to create something that, at least if we have to pivot, allows us to do so. So there's some common understandings about where we're at. This plan was designed to support the health and safety of everyone. In schools, our goals are to educate and keep students and staff safe. Students and staff safety is number one, educating is number two. Here, we've had to increase that level of safety measures. It's our goal to follow these expectations, but again, please understand that while we can reduce the spread of COVID-19, it cannot be eliminated, that there's always a level of risk. The current plan that we're going to be presenting largely focuses on phase 2. So phase 1 was complete remote learning that began last March, and we're phasing ourselves back into our building. So phase 2 is that first step, which includes a semi-restrictive hybrid plan of remote or home-based instruction and in-school instruction. And so this outlines a number of strategies to get us there. Eventually getting us to phase 3, which will have less restrictions, and to phase 4, which will be fully in school. To pull this off, there are a significant number of logistical issues that we have to deal with. I've mentioned just a few here in this slide. We have to modify our physical environment, our instructional practices, our management practices for the classrooms. We're going to have increased demands on staff's time and workload. How are we going to balance all that? The training that goes into this, our schedules, not only for the day, but also for the year. And then, of course, the policies, procedures, and practices we do, we need to make sure we're looking at them all with that increased safety perspective. We want to adopt these protocols with fidelity, but we also, again, need to recognize that this is a dynamic and fluid situation that may require some changes as we move through it. We need to have these common understandings as we move forward.
Can I interrupt you for 1 second?
Please do.
I just wanted to let the public know that called in on the phone that right now there is a presentation on the screen. And if you want to view that, then you can go to the YouTube channel for the SAU, and you can, the meeting is also being live streamed on YouTube.
I posted that in the chat so people have direct.
Oh, okay, good. I just wanted to make sure as people understood. Okay, I'm sorry. Carry on. Thank you, Chris.
No, thank you.
Just to be clear, go to SAU44.org and it will be right there on the home screen to click play, and that will live stream because the people on the phone won't see the chat. So it's SAU44.org and you'll be able to view this presentation as opposed to just listen.
And mute your phone.
Okay. So in putting together this plan, we had 4 guiding goals for reopening the Nottingham School. We wanted to ensure healthy classrooms, ensure a healthy building, ensure healthy policies and procedures, and ensure healthy schedules. We broke down what we needed to do into these 4 goals that guided our work. With these in mind, we aligned them with the New Hampshire's Back to School guidance document. That guidance document had 10 sub goals or sub topics for us to focus on. So under healthy policies, we developed the goals around the state recommendations for communications plans, student support, and of course, the health guidance from the New Hampshire DHHS as well as the CDC. Under healthy classrooms, we incorporated the goals of professional development, dynamic instruction, and the choices around hybrid environments. Excuse me. Under healthy buildings, there's quite a bit, but around technology and the physical environment. So while there's only 2 bullets there, there's quite a bit to be considering around keeping our buildings safe, as well as the healthy schedule, which talks about transportation, meals, and eventually we'll come down to what the daily schedule looks like as well. So that's how we incorporated everything together. Just some highlights around the healthy classrooms. So we're going to be requiring face coverings in buses, hallways, and classrooms. Masks will be required for everyone, grades K-8 as well as staff, and they're required at all times when 3 to 6 feet of social distancing is not possible, such as bus, hallways, and bathrooms. When students are seated at their desks, they may work independently. Masks are not required if we can get desk shields or face shields that are in use. And that is what we're proposing at doing, looking at getting some desk shields. And we want to be providing mask breaks as well. We're encouraging our classrooms to be outside and where they can actually have some 6 feet of separation when doing mask breaks or any other type of outdoor classroom-based exercises. Hand hygiene, students and staff are expected to wash their hands frequently and use hand sanitizer. If washing hands are not possible, we know that our K-4 classrooms are equipped with sinks, and we have several sinks upstairs. We're also putting outside of every single classroom, there's a sanitizer dispenser, and we have a few portable sanitizing dispensers that will be placed around the building as well. We're asking the physical distancing, people to keep 3 to 6 feet between individuals as much as possible for as long as possible. We're going to be rearranging traffic patterns, including in the classrooms, for seating arrangements that are created to accommodate any type of physical distancing that in areas that need it. One of the more challenging things we're going to be looking at, I think, is the shared materials, particularly in classrooms like science and art. But we're going to need to modify our curriculum and our activities to reduce the amount of shared equipment. We're going to choose activities that limit that close contact, which includes some of the group discussions. And we're hoping that technology can offset some of this by our Google Classroom and people using some shared docs on computers where they can be in 6 feet or more apart. Classroom directed breaks and use of common spaces as they become available. Classroom teachers are encouraged to bring students outside, as I mentioned, for classes and for breaks. We're going to be getting some more radios so that teachers can have that so they can still be in contact with the office. We are going to set occupancy limits in the gymnasium, the library, and other shared areas. And we are going to be reducing the amount of use in those areas as well. Our healthy buildings, our air ventilation. We did have the air ducts recently cleaned, so we feel good about that. And it is monitored on a regular basis. We are very fortunate to have an excellent maintenance department that is on top of things. And we have a contract with our vendor that regularly comes in and checks the quality of the machines, make sure it's all working. We're disinfecting all of the objects that may become shared or that at least shared surfaces within the building. We are purchasing a variety of disinfecting materials that have been recommended by New Hampshire, and not just nothing harsh, no bleach, no harsh chemicals. We're looking at items that are just 70% alcohol and mixed with non or inorganic materials.
Chris, I want to ask a question again.
Sure.
About the air ventilation. I feel like I remember when we discussed this in one of our meetings, but I want to clarify. Is it true that the way that our ventilation system works is that it takes air from the outside and it's not recirculating air from inside?
Correct.
Okay. Just wanted to, thank you.
Yeah. And we're also purchasing fans, and of course they have the upstairs air conditioners as well for around air quality. There's some discussion around the use of fans and how that might circulate air and it being a plus or a minus, but the state has recommended having windows open as much as possible. So we're going to figure out how we can get some clean air circulated. We also have a meeting coming up that's going to be talking about the potential, depending on cost, of course, use of ultraviolet air cleaners in classrooms built into ceiling tiles. So there's a lot of things coming up that this virus has produced that are open to schools. But of course, everything also comes down to cost as well as the priority. We are purchasing physical barriers. Plexiglass-like shielding. We are very cautious to make sure whatever we're purchasing meets the fire codes and standards that are our maintenance team has put together.
Can't hear you.
You can't hear me?
Well, we couldn't for that last little bit, but now I can.
All right, hold on a second.
So maybe just review the last like 2 minutes that you just said right before water bottle. I got your prop.
Okay, I don't know can you hear me now?
Yes.
Okay, interesting. So yeah, so we're in the process of, so the water fountains are not going to be in use, the bottle filling stations will, and we're asking and hydration systems, and we're looking at getting some of the touchless bathroom fixtures.
Mr. Sousa,
Yes,
your connection's still choppy. Can you try turning your video camera off?
sure.
Sorry to interrupt.
It's okay. Can you see the screen now?
Yes.
Yeah.
Is this any better?
Yes.
Okay.
Much better.
I also somehow I think I had to change my microphone as well.
Let's have everyone else mute though, because I'm hearing background noise too.
All right, so you can still see my screen, and this should be better overall.
Yeah, we can hear you now.
So we're looking at as much no contact infrastructure as we can, using bathroom fixtures that have the infrared activations or some other type of touchless systems for even the faucets. We're just waiting on some of these materials to come in. We've begun ordering them, knowing that we have some funds in the CARE grants, and then we're offsetting some other things in our budget to make sure that we can afford some of these, what we think are really not only good safety features for this, but good to have in the building. Our maintenance department, our maintenance director, Scott Brown, has really worked hard trying to look at what the schedule would be for cleaning, the high touch or shared surfaces in particular, to make sure those are priority, as well as our bathroom hygiene. Those are some really important areas we want to be focusing on. We're looking at, under healthy policies and procedures, creating a culture of safe practices. We really need to make sure that everyone understands this. So we're going to be trying to engage our students at all levels and grades about the importance of ongoing healthy practices and safety. We've done this in the past around coughing and sneezing. We're just going to up our game a bit. Also, we know that it's important that as the adults in the building, that we model a sense of calmness and self-assurance and positivity, that we need to be focusing on stabilizing students, building relationships, and modeling expectations and implementing a support system. Students are coming back after being 6 months out of the school. It's going to be important for us to welcome them back and to make them feel comfortable, as well as staff and parents. Athletics at this time, we're not sure about. We're waiting for the NHIAA, which is the state organization, to release their findings and their recommendations, which should be coming out this Friday. We have some protocols that we've been looking at based on some of the youth protocols. We are waiting for some more action as far as around hiring our athletic director and coaches and whatnot, that'll follow through to see who might take the lead on putting some of those pieces together. Under co-curricular activities and school-wide events, clubs that can be offered remotely will be offered. We did some computer-based clubs last year. But whole school assemblies, dances, and other large events like the Move-a-thon will not take place until further notice. Arrival and dismissal and transitions between classes. We're going to be looking at those patterns to make sure we can modify them to accommodate social distance guidelines. Along those lines, it may be that we are going to stagger bus drop-off versus car drop-off by some time periods as people come in the building to make sure we're not overloading the hallways. And that will be for both arrival and dismissal. Overall, we need to limit the building population and also make sure we are separating our cohorts. So classroom cohorts of students need to keep their distance between other classroom cohorts. We are not going to be allowing parent visitor access to the building as much as possible, especially during early drop-off and dismissal or people coming to pick up their kids in the middle of the day or coming in late. They'll be utilizing the vestibule or the front, and we can put some sign-in sheets, and we have our camera system to be able to view that as it happens. We're not going to be having parent volunteers in the buildings whenever possible. Any kind of meetings or conferences can be held remotely. We will have, of course, the safety protocols around face coverings and distances for some of those meetings that need to be held in person. And school building use by outside groups will be significantly reduced or restricted. And it just is a matter of making sure that we can maintain cleaning and keeping a healthy environment based on the population we have in the building, as opposed to a lot of after school and evening groups coming in and then having to try and clean and take care of those as well. Illness prevention per the
Chris,
CDC.
will there be aftercare? Will there still be aftercare?
So aftercare, there is a plan that the town is putting together for aftercare, but we need to really make sure what our protocols are first before they can commit to anything. So I can't. I know I have a meeting set up to talk to Courtney and Bridget about that, but until we know what we're doing, they can't build on it. Excuse me. Illness prevention. We're going to be establishing protocols for screenings for students and staff members and visitors as they enter the building. Some of that will be active screening. The majority of that will be relying on parents and visitors to screen themselves at home as well. For instance, any children who are at home entering the school bus or being dropped off, their parents should have gone through them and checked their temperatures and screened them at home for any kind of symptoms. We're going to be working hard to educate and communicate all of this to our parents so that they understand what the expectations are. And our nurse will be here to evaluate any students who might report any kind of symptoms or be reported for any kind of symptoms, and we'll check them in. We're going to be creating a section of the building that is offer a little bit of quarantine space, for lack of a better term, for students who might be showcasing some of those symptoms and may need to go home. We're establishing communication distance learning protocols. So we've started last fall, last spring with remote learning. And we have a pretty good handle on some of the tools and things that are necessary to establish a remote learning environment, which is a complete replacement of in-school or in-person instruction. This year, we're also looking at now incorporating some distance learning strategies. So if we're able to get students in the building for some of the time, and then some of the time they're at home learning, it may be a mix of what we're calling saddle or skill application and discovery distance learning environment. It's an asynchronous independent learning that is distinct from remote learning, which has elements of both teaching and independent learning. It will have some communication using Google or Zoom as needed, but the distance learning, the saddle time, is largely an independent learning. I like to equate it to the flipped classroom, which is a very progressive and common practice in education, where the teachers are basically assigning some of the learning work, so watching a video or reading a chapter and writing down questions and trying to create questions around that, then coming into school and answering those questions and guiding them through what that work might be like. Kind of like bringing your homework to the classroom, where you can have an expert in the classroom coach you through how to do it all. And so that may incorporate some of the day. Also, we may have some remote learning, at least one day a week or so, where it's a fully 100% remote instruction where staff and students can share time online, either in Zoom or Google Meets. And that may be on any of those days. We might incorporate that as classroom meeting times, morning meetings, or individual small group instructional periods. We are putting together response teams. There's a communication committee and the COVID leadership team that will help with communication around all these aspects. Of course, our school nurse will be the lead contact for any health-related questions. All right. At this point in time, lunches, for healthy schedules, we're looking at scheduling lunches in the classrooms. We have to maintain proper precautions and social distancing, but utilizing the cafeteria and having to clean it as cohorts of students come in and out of there, we don't feel is a really, for our phase 2, is not a safe environment. We couldn't maintain the level of quality of safety procedures that we would like to. Recess, students will wash or sanitize their hands before and after recess, and we're going to be asking the cohorts to schedule their recess and stagger them themselves. We'll also be utilizing as much of our field space and outdoor space as possible, the playground, all the fields areas, so that we can spread the cohorts out. Our instructional model, which is something we're going to have to talk about, the suggestion by the committee is that our school operate on an alternating schedule in order to accommodate 50% student population. So this way our K students will be scheduled in some type of capacity. As an example, I mentioned last name, although that really is not going to work for us. It doesn't simply divide us up in half. But students will have 2 days of distance learning, 2 days of in-school learning, and 1 day of remote learning. Transportation, we'll talk more about that in a little bit. Transportation, we're encouraging parents to transport. We're designing a new system as far as drop-off, what that might look like, utilizing gym space and encouraging our students to go right to the classroom. We're going to be organizing them so they can go right into their cohorts right away. And again, I mentioned we're going to be staggering them, buses and drop-offs, to allow for more social distancing. Right now, Dale Transportation has informed us that they can fit 26 students per bus. So once we have a plan in place, she'll go ahead. We will be requiring masks to be worn while riding the bus. And when we can, we'll have all the windows open. We are asking that everyone use hand sanitizer prior to getting on the bus. The bus itself cannot provide hand sanitizer. You can't have hand sanitizer on the bus. Just goes around. Our attendance overall school attendance, guardian all students for school, SAT, and remote instruction. So if a student wants to be in the learning process or absence from school, attendance procedures will yet be developed by staff. Our goals and system on level. Okay, that was a lot. Any questions at this point?
Was everyone else losing Chris a little bit in there?
Yes, I was just going to say just the last minute or two.
Yes, I didn't hear the last like 30, 45 seconds, but then I did hear him say that was a lot.
Yes. I
Right.
didn't hear a lot of the very end.
So the last few bullets I spoke about probably were, you may have missed, it was transportation and attendance. And so transportation, we are having we were told by Dale Transportation that we can have 26 students per bus. And so that once we get a plan in place, they're going to be going around, she's going to redo the routes to see how we can accommodate that for parents who may want to still use the bus, although we're encouraging that parent transportation be utilized. As far as attendance goes, school-wide attendance, we're asking parents to call their students in absent if they are not going to be engaged in remote learning, the distance learning, or the in-person learning. So if a student is not going to be involved in learning that day, we want to consider them absent and have the parent call them in. We are looking at some classroom attendance policies as well, and that will be developed by staff So the attendance policies are going to change and shift a little bit once we get staff in here and can get this plan at a more granular level. So the instructional models, as I mentioned earlier, the phases of reopening school are phase 1, which is that fully remote instruction that we began last March. And we're looking at going into a phase 2, that restrictive hybrid model, which is a mix of in-school and remote instruction. Phase 3 would be a less restrictive model. And then I guess phase 4, fully in-school instruction and learning. So we're trying to plan for that phase 2 model. Our committee looked at several different, many different permutations of what it would look like to have in-school learning, to that phase 2, that mix, that hybrid model. And it was broken down eventually into 5 plans. And then from the 5 plans, we narrowed it down to our top 3, with clearly having one that was more preferred over the others. Regardless of the hybrid option, I wanted to mention that we'd also like to consider changing or altering the start and end of the school day. Some of that is around staggering the arrival and dismissal times for bus and car riders. I mentioned maybe a 10-minute gap for that to allow for social distancing. But in addition, I'd like to have the school end 50 minutes early, which will allow time for all staff to check in with student emails.
Can't hear you, Chris.
So I can hear him this time. What about everybody else?
I was able to hear him.
I was hearing him.
Okay.
Carry on.
So in addition to the dismissal times, if we shorten the school day, the in-person day, not the learning day, but the in-person day by 50 minutes, 50, it will allow for time. It will allow time for staff to check in with student emails or parents on a daily basis. They can have that period to just support the distance learning model that we're going to be incorporating in a hybrid plan. So our in-school day would run from 8:05 to 1:50. And then the staff would be working with students who are part of the distance learning programs for that last 50-minute period. Oops.
Yeah, at this point, I would just like to add that I think one of the largest concerns, I think, in the community was making sure that we're not having teachers doing double duty. So they're not teaching in person all day and then spending their afternoon and evening then catching up with those students that have had their remote day. I think the teachers were concerned, but I think everyone wanted to make sure that whatever we're asking of teachers is not going to sort of exceed what they've had to do in the past.
Yeah, absolutely. I think a big component of our plan is about workability. And when we start looking at what that daily schedule might be, again, please consider all this to be that 5,000-foot view. It's that we may be tweaking things out to make it doable for not only our staff, but also for our students and families. Along those lines, we need to collect some hard data so we can help make these decisions. And the biggest question we would have is if staff and students or families are going to be sending their students in for an in-school option, for the hybrid option, or are they going to choose to be fully remote? We need to have that decision in writing per family or per student. Our hope is to get that decision together and gather commitments by August 7th. If a decision is made by a parent or guardian to have that child or children engage in fully remote learning and to utilize options such as our staff or VLAX or other online sources, we're asking that they commit to, commit to that for the entire marking period. It just is untenable for us to be able to have students coming in and out at various times. So if we look at approaches from a marking period standpoint, if you're going to commit to remote learning, you do that for a marking period, and we'll do our best to support you, but also encouraging you to use other outside agencies such as VLAX to support any type of remote materials or things you might need. So those are some of the big decisions that we're going to be needing to make moving forward. Okay. We recently did a survey, and we did the SAU-wide survey, and then we did just the Nottingham survey, and these are the results. As you can see, 50% of our population would be comfortable sending their child to full-time school in the building with reasonable safety precautions. But virtually 50% have concerns about being in the building full-time. And obviously you can see that, but 21% would feel more comfortable if their child stayed home and participated in remote learning for the full quarter. And then 28% preferred a hybrid model. Under transportation, half our population, for the most part, 48.7%, is going to be relying on bus transportation for both. This is an increase from our, I should say that the green, the neither, the parent transport is an increase of about a third from our normal transportation. So parents are getting the message that we're encouraging them and that they've already made the decision to transport their own children, but that is going to increase our drop-off time and certainly change that dynamic. Whoops, sorry. So for staff, we surveyed our staff very simply to see, looking at what grade span did they teach in, or where in the building were they working, and their comfort level of coming into the building and doing in-school working. And this is going to guide us, particularly as we look at the supports that we might need for remote learning for those students who are going to be home, and what staff may be able to connect with them on a regular basis. So if you look at the graph, the orange, the 58.5%, our staff are comfortable coming in with reasonable precautions, and 20% would be comfortable coming in with some type of hybrid model, limiting days, et cetera. But there's 21.5% that would be comfortable if they stayed home and participated in remote learning for the first quarter. So we are certainly going to be looking at that data. And again, we need that hard data per person to begin thinking about how we're going to be structuring remote learning. What is that percentage of students who want to be homeschooled, for lack of a better term, and staff who want to work remotely?
Can I just ask a clarifying question?
Mm-hmm.
So looking at the other graph, the majority of parents wanted to come back full time. Over half of them, is that what I was seeing? When they say full time,
50.4% want to come back full time.
so that's more than half. And then 28% wanted hybrid, and less than a quarter were saying we just want to stay at home. And then 58% of the teachers are their preference is to just return full time to class.
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
Yeah, and these are very similar to what we had received at the SAU level and some of the state surveys as well.
Mm-hmm.
Any other questions, anyone?
One question I do have, I feel it's around consistency or even equity to a certain extent. If we are doing remote, and I guess I have to honestly say the remote methods, I have a lot of questions about, but if we went to a remote model fully, would teachers come in and utilize their classrooms, or would this remote model be everybody kind of doing it from their home?
So the discussions that we've had with some teaching teams, some of our teacher representatives in leadership roles, as well as the administrative level, is that if we were going to go to fully remote, our recommendation would be that we offer and encourage our staff to do the remote learning from the building. The conversations that I've had with staff have been that they would prefer, many of them would prefer that because this is where their resources are. Also, the technology aspects of it are more conducive because they can utilize some of the classroom technology that's built in. We've also made some purchases around new cameras and lapel mics for staff to be able to utilize technology in the building to make it easier to, say, run stations within their classrooms. So setting up a classroom learning environment, even remotely, would be easier if it was in the building and utilizing a large space. We could maintain social distancing for staff just because of they'd be in their classroom. 1 or 2 people in a classroom would be the most allowed. So that would be the plan moving forward if we were to be fully remote.
Okay, thank you.
You're welcome. Or at least that's the recommendation, I should say.
Yeah.
So the committee, in the end, the recommendation that we're putting forward for a hybrid model is that we would have the building at 50% capacity. Now, for discussion's sake, I've just used dividing the students up by last name. We know that that will not be completely effective because we'll still have to be looking at certain academic groupings, as well as the fact that we have to balance the number of students in the building. And we certainly don't have an even split based on last names. But I wanted to use last names so that people would understand that we want to divide it up by families as well. So that one family wouldn't have a 5th grader going on one day and a 2nd grader going on another. That they could, we want to make it as easy on them as possible. So what we'd be looking at, for example, is one group of students would be in the building on Monday and Wednesday. And then another group of students would be in the building on Tuesday and Thursday. And Friday would be a full remote day, similar to what we did last spring, allowing the building to be cleaned and disinfected throughout that entire day without the students in particular the common areas. And then all grades, when they're not in school, would participate in the distance learning model that's saddle Monday to Thursday. Again, the goal is to reduce classroom cohort sizes. So our average classroom, say, even on the large level, there's 26 students. This would put 13 students in a classroom that we believe we can spread out 3 to 6 feet. It does have an impact on the instructional schedule.
Can I just interrupt for 1 second?
Mm-hmm.
I just want to say based on, so we only had limited numbers in terms of responses for who would be coming back or who's hoping to come back and who wanted to be remote. But based on our sort of estimations from the numbers that we did have, I would think 13 students in a classroom would be on the larger side and that some of them may be smaller than 10. But we don't know that 100% until after we get people's commitments one way or another.
Yeah, we had about 60% respondents. And you know, even if we had 20% say they didn't show up, that would reduce our class sizes tremendously. So I would completely agree.
I have another question. This saddle model, I guess I'd honestly say concerns me. And maybe we're just not at the point yet to discuss this, but I'm still a little not understanding. So the 2 days that students are not, those alternating days that they're not in school, they would be asynchronous. And then they'd get that 1 hour of connection with their teacher from that 50-minute block that you're discussing.
Correct. If they needed questions answered, et cetera. Yes.
We also,
It also doesn't mean that we wouldn't have staff, particularly if you're one of our staff members who are not going to be in the building, you might be also engaging students in a morning meeting on a regular basis. So there'll be some connection on every day.
right, we talked about having either a paraprofessional or one of the, like Chris was saying, teachers that are working remotely as well, sort of being able to still touch base with students on those days. And, like my suggestion was, can they have a morning meeting to help students sort of organize their assignments, make sure they're fully understanding what they learned when they were in person the day before, get them ready for their day, that sort of thing, and then allow students some time to work on their own, and then maybe they're touching base again later, that kind of thing. But those are the kinds of sort of details that can't be determined until we know more specifically how many students are coming back, which students are coming back, how many staff, which staff, and those types of things. Because without knowing that, it's just really hard to plan those details.
Yeah.
I think the idea was that those days would be largely independent for the students, but not completely without support.
So we'll get this presentation and then we'll have an opportunity to discuss, I suppose, at the end, right?
That's, yeah. I think that's,
I'll hold my comments until after.
So the idea of students coming in 2 days a week will allow school to operate in person with roughly half the population, to be able to meet our physical distancing guidelines in the building and on the buses. So it will make busing a lot easier to work with. Students will participate in that distance learning model 2 days a week. And they're expected to complete tasks assigned by their teachers using purposeful and extended learning, independent practice and review, et cetera, the skill acquisition time. And then on Fridays, as remote instruction day, students can also touch base, have contact teachers, or have in-person, or I shouldn't say in-person, but Zoom or Google Meet with students individually, small group, or in large group as well. And that would be, let's say, on a Friday. The other options that the committee discussed and narrowed it down to our top three, but again, the last one was the preferred model, was to do half school days for all and to divide the school up in a similar fashion, 50% in the morning and 50% in the afternoon. And to do this, of course, we would also have to have the combination of that remote learning or distance learning strategies for students on certain days in order to accommodate teachers having some prep time and lunchtime. In order to, we would have to have no UA periods. And so all unified arts would have to be done remotely. And again, if we could change that, we certainly would try. But and lunches would need to be done in the classrooms if we could provide lunches. Fridays would be a fully remote day, so this is a 4-in-1 type of schedule. And the last one that we talked about was an alternating day, similar to the first model, but just divided by grades. So K4 students would be in the building on Monday and Tuesday, and grades 5-8 would be in, say, Wednesday or Thursday, Friday, and Wednesday would be a day off so that we could clean the building. So again, that was alternating 2 days for grades K4 and 2 days for 5-8. We realized that this one could propose a lot of struggles for families, particularly if they have more than one child spread across several grades. But those are some of the options that we did discuss. We wanted to make sure you saw. Next steps. There's a lot of work that has to get done. Not only just the discussion around this, but all the minute details that we want our staff to begin delving into. So those to-do list pieces. Right now, it's our school boards, we're asking you guys to decide on what that phase 2 reopening model would look like. Other things you might want to be thinking about is discussing the funding, our overall plan, and also, how we're going to communicate all this out to folks. And then you can see the other list of things that need to be done. In order to get a lot of this work done, particularly the work that we need staff on and the training, I'm asking that we delay the start of school for students to increase professional development day. The committee discussed this, and universally, everyone agreed that we would need the time. The commissioner has extended the PD time, the recommendations for the state, and he's reduced the student requirement for being in school for days from 180 to 177, as well as the corresponding hour restrictions. Which means for us, we were expected to have students back in the building on August 26th, which is a Wednesday. We could have them come back on the 31st, which is a Monday, and give our staff that entire week as PD time. Or we could push it even farther and give our staff a little extra days as well. We know for Labor Day, currently right now, we have the 4th and the 7th off. The town has asked us to use the building on the 8th, which would be a non-student day. So we can look at what those weeks would be, depending, of course, on the plan we choose, and maybe having students come back September 2nd and possibly changing that that Friday, the 4th, et cetera. But obviously there's scheduling issues that we need to discuss for the calendar. But if we can add more PD days in for staff, I know it would be greatly appreciated if not necessary. And that's it. Thank you, everybody.
Thank you so much.
Answer any questions. And
Thank you, Chris.
So before we move on, I'm just thinking maybe we'll get our regular screen back so we could see some more people.
okay, I did want to mention, I think everyone has seen this, correct?
Mhm.
This was the remote, just to kind of at a glance.
I think that'll be really helpful when we are ready to release things to the public too, so people can kind of see it without having to read a 25-page document. They can just sort of see the highlights of each category. So that was
Great. So I'm going to stop sharing my screen now.
Thank you.
There you go.
So I was thinking, and this is up to the board, but I was thinking at this point now the board could have some dialogue, ask questions and discuss what we've been just talking about so far. And then possibly after that, open it up for public comment. What's the board's pleasure?
I think that's a great idea.
Okay.
That sounds like a great idea as well.
My suggestion is that we start with the discussion around what we want the daily structure to look like in terms of, do we want to be fully remote? Do we want to be fully back in? Do we want to talk about this hybrid model and how and I think after that, maybe talk about some of the other details, like maybe mask wearing and other things people want to discuss, so that we can hammer out just a few of those sort of big details for the community. So where would you guys like to begin in terms of talking about hybrid, remote, fully? And
I think that that's one of the most important things, aside from some of the details that will really make a difference for us to decide, are we going fully remote? Are we going to be back in school? Are we doing a hybrid? And so I'm happy to start by saying, I think that we have no choice but to do a hybrid, ready within like a day or two's notice to go fully remote if we see things going south. And I think that Chris and the whole school community did an amazing job going from Friday to Tuesday, Wednesday, and starting that was just absolutely amazing. But now we know that could happen. And if we see the numbers going in the wrong way, that we're able to go fully remote. But I think that having a hybrid is important. I don't know that it's possible to truly physically, that's what we're saying we're going to do. I don't know that it's good for their mental health to be telling them not to touch each other and to stay away from each other. Somebody.
so Roz, I think we're having trouble hearing you.
I can't hear Rod at all.
Yeah. Yeah.
We lost our connection, Roz. All right. Okay, maybe someone,
I don't know that we can really do that.
okay.
Dr. Shavda, we lost about half of what you said.
Yeah. I think I got I got all the beginning parts. I think you were saying that we need to be ready to move fully remote. And I think that where I lost you mostly was at the end where you were saying something about it not being realistic for us to ask them to social distance. And I missed part of that. Do you want to try again and see if we can hear you? Or is she gone?
Maybe she's changing from her phone
Yeah,
to
she
the,
might have.
yeah.
Earlier she left and had to come back in, so she might have done that. So to her point, I just wanted to mention that part of the discussion that we had in the small group was no matter what plan we have, whatever element of in-school learning we have is going to be done with the intention of possibly being remote in the future. And there are a lot of reasons why we could be remote in the future. Only one of those reasons is, the number of COVID cases going up in our area, or maybe having some in our building. But also we may get to the point where so many people are having cold and flu symptoms, just normal cold and flu symptoms, and it's hard to determine whether or not those are COVID related. You can't. That we may end up having to go remote for a period of time simply because people have colds. So the idea is that all in-school learning would be supportive to whatever element of home learning we have, whether that's the home learning we're going to be having in conjunction with the in-school learning, but also preparing students and families for the idea that we may be fully remote at some time. So that means teachers assigning work in the same way they would be assigning work when we go remote, and helping students understand how to use the technology and be prepared for some time management and all of those types of things. So to that point, I think, and the teachers also felt very strongly that that's exactly what they would want to do. I know Ms. Janot said in one of the meetings that, part of what was hard for them was going into the last one was that they didn't have any time to prepare their students. And they had all said, according to her, if we were going to do this again, we would want to make sure that we're all ready. And so that's been thought of. And I think that's a good point. Roz, I see that you're back on now. Do you want to try again? Because I missed the part of what you were saying when you started saying something about social distancing and how that will be difficult.
Yes, what I was saying was that I know that we are ready to go and we have great plans, but I think that when we're talking about kindergarten through maybe second grade, I think that it's going to be difficult to maintain that physical distancing for those students, partially because of social emotional health. I mean, I think it's difficult to tell kindergartners and first graders that they can't approach their teacher. They can't, if something happens, they cry. I mean, I think that's just a difficult age. And so because of that, I think it's really important that we be ready to go to remote learning at any time, because again, I think that that's an age where they are constantly and consistently interacting physically with each other. And so I think that the plan that you guys have been, I think that all of the stuff that you guys have done is really important and really well thought out. I do also think that K through second grade it's going to be really important that we figure out how to, in a day's notice, pivot and go to remote learning. So I'm now echoing what you just said.
Yeah.
Because you stole my thunder, because you heard me. No, I'm just kidding.
Expressing your concern and saying that, yes, agree. And I think the whole committee agrees with that.
Yeah.
Well, after teaching for 32 years, K1 and 2, I 100% agree with you, Roz. They're the best huggers in the world, and it's really hard to teach social distancing when they just need a hug, and we won't be able to give that to them. So that is, I would find that very difficult. And that would probably be the most difficult part of the whole social aspect of this. But it's something that has to be done. And I guess we have to learn how to express to them that we do care about them without touching them.
Oof.
So I'm wondering, could we maybe just, I've been very impressed with, the plans as we've seen them. I realize a lot of work has gone into it. My concerns obviously are around the students and the students receiving the most fully developed educational experience that they can have, and that families are able to participate if they want to, and that teachers feel comfortable in the environment in which they have to work. So those are the three things that the lens through which I'm filtering all of this information. And so I'm wondering if maybe we could explore the hybrid model. And I don't want this to sound like a criticism, but all of the work and review and studying that I've been doing for the last few months is that this hard, fast pivot to remote, we did lose some ground with students. And I understand the whole world is experiencing that, but at the same time, I think we need to do something to mitigate that going forward and ensure that our students are getting the best possible education regardless of our model. So I was sort of thinking that when we did this hybrid, that you'd have, you'd split the students and that would take care of the social distancing piece, and that the teachers would be in the classroom and the kids would be in the classroom, and that the students that were at home on that day would also be partaking of the classroom instruction. So as I say, the saddle component concerns me because essentially 3 days a week, although the one single day isn't saddle, it's more independent. And one of the things that I would like to see is more structure and consistency.
Right. Chris, do you want to speak to that a little bit?
Sure.
So,
So
put you on the spot, but I
no, absolutely. Believe me, we've been thinking, and so many of us have been talking about what that might look like. It would be ideal if we could translate the classroom experience via video to the home, but largely that can't be done. Our teachers, the way we teach, particularly at the younger grades, but even all the way up through, is we might offer some small semblance of classroom or large group instruction, and then it becomes a lot of small group work and coaching that gets done around the classroom. We've worked really hard to personalize the education for the students. And so we considered, what if we put a camera in the classroom and have the teacher teach? What they're going to see is certainly some guided lessons, and there is some value to that. But then then there's the independent seat work that the kids are going to do while the teacher goes around and coaches, and that's what will be lost with that home piece. So we were concerned about how we're going to balance that and make that an effective teaching tool. And so this is where the distance learning piece, and I had a conversation with an administrator over in Bedford to see how they were approaching that with their elementary schools. And they're utilizing, that's where the distance learning in my mind came from, they thought the distance learning was a lot of that independent seat work. So if they were doing a lot of direct instruction for half the day and then the other half of the day was the seat work that goes on, their distance learning is that seat work that they can then, if we can get time during the day, where they could have some email questions to teachers and they could respond, that allows them to at least, beef that up a bit if possible. Overall, I think, Susan, I completely share your concerns around educating our kids. I think every single teacher and parent does. I know that coming back to a hybrid, particularly to this phase 2 hybrid model, is not going to replace the education that we normally would do. I think I mentioned that at the last board meeting, that as we increase our safety measures, we decreased the style and the type of education, the learning that we can provide. So how do we balance that has been the big question. And that's where this model has come from. I think, if things progress in a positive way, that phase 3 would be bringing more kids back into the building and increasing our in-person learning. And so we know this is a gradual step, and that's where this hybrid model came from. If there's an idea that we want to either go fully remote or fully back in, I mean, those are certainly options as well. We were just considering that this graduated step back into education, at least in some formal piece. In addition, just to mention that scheduling and structure component, we've heard that loud and clear. That has come across all of our parent surveys, and we want to ensure that our staff has time to plan and to build in those structures, including recommending structures for students at home. And the first few weeks of school, aside from team building and certainly addressing some of the social emotional aspects of bringing kids back into the building and just starting the school year out, is going to be largely built around routines and helping kids understand the type of routines they're going to need when they're home, and assisting parents with that too as best we can.
Yeah, and Sue, so I tried to wrap my brain around your idea of sort of the more synchronous learning from the classroom. And I think maybe we have teachers listening, and maybe they'll share their thoughts on this too when it's time for public comment. But I just can't see and maybe you have an idea of how it works, and please feel free to share it. Because I'm not definitely putting the idea down. I'm just saying logistically, I don't see how it will work well, because I feel like the teacher will be teaching in the classroom, and then there'll be a computer that may have 8 faces on it or 10 faces on it from the students that are home, and who's monitoring the computer to see if they have questions. And I struggle with, I feel like the teachers that are in the classroom are going to feel split, and that I just think I mean, I don't think there's any good, all of the solutions have issues, but I feel like that one is, it would just be difficult to put into place. Do you have any thoughts on that?
I'm going to listen to what everyone has to say. I've seen plans where some schools are utilizing the technology that has been placed in the schools, and perhaps adding a person to the classroom to assist. I want to do obviously what works for our teachers and respect their methods. I really do. So really where I'm coming from is a place of respect for people, but still I don't feel like I'm being too naive. I still would want to push as hard as possible to provide a full education for the kids. And I feel that asynchronous is concerning. Maybe we evolve more into asynchronous as we develop how we deliver that. But I also am concerned about the disparities that may be accumulating, so that you start out 2 on and 2 off, and then you come back, and the disparities from the asynchronous learning begin to compile. So, and I think that creates difficulties for teachers as well. So those, but again, where I'm coming from is a place of trying to understand where our students are landing at this point, what kind of assessments we would be utilizing to determine, where they are, coming into their new grades and delivering as full a model as possible.
Okay, so I just wrote something down that you said so I can get back to it. But I want to say I don't disagree with anything that you said. And I know from the survey results that we got from everyone, I think students, parents, and guardians and staff as well, that a lot of the comments were looking for more structure, more consistency, more synchronous. I mean, I think that's what people are craving as well and what people will need. And so in my mind, even with this model, my hope is that once we have a better determination of exactly which staff will be remote and which staff will be in school and how, you know, how that all kind of works out, is that we'll be able to plan for those, so like the distance learning days to still have some element of structure and support, and as much as we possibly can implement. And I struggle at this point. I wish we could have like a definitive plan and say this is exactly what we would do. But we just can't do that until we know more. But I do agree with you. And then in terms of assessments, I don't know, Chris, if you want to speak to that and how, I know we talked about like the first few weeks of school and all that kind of stuff. So I don't know if you want to speak to that part.
Yeah, so if we think of school, you know, coming back, knowing that our priority is really going to be around starting the school day and getting students back to seeing each other and understanding the new process and procedures around our schedule and of course the social distancing, et cetera. We're having that big focus on social emotional learning and combined with just what our school looks like and the changes. Academically, we are going to be assessing our students at a variety of levels, and we're building in the first 3 weeks, making sure we're benchmarking all of our children, including utilizing some of the same systems that we normally use, which would be our NEWA scores and our Ames web process assessments as well. So we need to know where the kids are, so then we can then build our curriculum around, you know, moving forward, and also looking at where then, as we move forward, we can fill in certain gaps, et cetera.
It's not in there.
Thank you. So that is a plan that the Curriculum and Assessment Committee at the SAU, Jude was part of that committee, had been working on and began putting together a plan of how that might work for us. If you look at the overall plan, we did talk about preparing for that, some of that dynamic instruction and looking at what an individual student baseline would be. Some of that's going to come through our IEP 504 and our RTI processes. But also we're going to have to build in the considerations around grouping our students. And I mentioned that that is why we really can't just do by last name. We're going to have to be looking at the academic groupings as well. And we're going to need some assessment, some baseline data in order to do that.
Thank you.
And I think, Chris, if I'm not mistaken, that the teacher preparation days prior to school beginning is where you will make all those footprints for you to follow in the first few weeks of school. And without those days, I think we'd be really doing a disservice to our teachers as well as our students. But since you've spoken about putting those days into the calendar, I feel very confident that our teachers can assess our children and have a path already lined up before the kids even come in the door.
Absolutely. Thank you, Kathy. Yes, it's going to be vital to give our teachers the gift of time to prepare for this new reality in this phase 2. At the same time, we are committed to creating a schedule for grades 2 through 8 for our NEWA scores and NEWA assessments to be given in both reading and math. And then we're looking at, and this is of course going to rely heavily on the teacher's discretion and where they see, but using our Ames Web Plus in reading and math for everybody for the first month of school so that we can, again, begin benchmarking.
Another point you made, Sue, about disparities and watching disparities grow and seeing larger gaps with this model. One other thing that the committee discussed is implementing some form of additional support for students that may need it on that remote learning day, and possibly having some population of students in the building to offer additional supports. If that's something that we can implement. And again, it's the details of that, something that we can really hammer out so we know more specifically who is going to be where. But it's something that's a possibility.
Yes, I think I want to really emphasize the fact that this is new for everyone. This is a new system of teaching and learning. And we're not going to have all the answers mapped out until we really start getting into it. And we're going to have slip ups and we're going to make mistakes as we continue to twist and turn and pivot throughout this process. But I want to be clear that this is not going to look like it did last fall when we started the year without this over us, that we are looking at a completely different way. We are running almost two separate school systems. I recognize that there's a lot of uncertainty around that. And unfortunately, I can only reassure you in the fact that I know that we have some of the hardest working staff I've ever met in my career, and they are smart people, and they're going to work to do the best they can to ensure that our kids are not only safe, but are learning.
Other thoughts or comments or discussion around the hybrid model?
I have a question. I think I heard as you were talking that you're going to try to honor the people who are absolutely not comfortable coming into the building with remote opportunities that might match up to remote needs of students. Is that right?
Yeah, Chris.
Yes, I think that's part of the overall plan that we'd like to. I would suspect that there's some logistical issues that have to be worked out between the SAU level and the teachers and the unions, how that might look. I know that we've already asked staff who have some concerns around their health and safety to submit letters to the SAU, particularly around some of the ADA requirements that we're as employees need to fill out. But I think our goal is to try and offer not just those staff members who have a specific physical issue, but also just that the ones who are really quite not sure yet or uncomfortable, that we have a place for them, particularly when we look at the numbers in the survey, that 20% of our population wasn't comfortable coming back from that family standpoint, that we know we're going to be having some needs for some staff to man, for lack of a better term, a remote learning environment. And we're hoping to be able perhaps to utilize that those staff members to support that aspect of the plan.
Yeah, I do know that we talked about this before the meeting officially started, is that there are some districts out there that are saying, you come back to learning, or, we're not offering a remote option. And so your choices are limited. And I'm comfortable with that. I feel like that's almost forcing people to decide what they're afraid of less, more afraid of. I just personally would be uncomfortable with that. And I'm happy with the fact that we think we'll be able to accommodate a remote option.
I really appreciate that part of the plan.
I agree.
I think it's very important to make sure our staff is comfortable and we can help support them as they help support our kids.
Thank you. That's awesome.
Okay, so more about this hybrid. I don't know if the board wants to have a discussion. I feel like we've sort of jumped a step into assuming that hybrid is the way to go. I don't know if the board wants to make any comments or has any questions about either the, the option of going fully remote right now, or has any questions about why the committee doesn't think the right thing to do is correcting me. Okay.
I would,
No, go ahead.
Christine, I think that's a good question. I would like for them to, or for you guys to tell us why you chose hybrid versus fully remote or fully in school. I think I know why, but it would be good for other people to know and for me to actually know and not to assume.
Well, Christine, you want me to?
Yeah, you go ahead, and if I want to step in, I will. Good at that.
So this was some of the conversations that started at the SAU level and also filtered down, was to what it might look like. Of the original options, and there still are options, of course, is to say we're going to be fully remote or even fully in school. The state has asked us to look at and create a hybrid model that will accommodate people. The words out of the commissioner's mouth was that we want to work hard to accommodate all of our parents and students. So that's really where the idea of phasing in and utilizing several hybrid models came from. It was directly from the governor and the commissioner. Not that it wasn't already spoken about, because it certainly was something other states were doing. So I think there's certainly merit to having that conversation about starting out remotely and what that might look like, because that certainly would change plans. I think we would still want to get kids in the building and staff in the building to do some SEL work, maybe on a much more limited basis while we do fully remote. But we felt that this hybrid model addressed some of that social emotional issues that we might have with the students. It allows us to begin to see our students and better assess them. As much as we believe we can produce a rigorous remote learning environment, it's not the same level of instructional integrity that we have when we're in the building and when our teachers are face to face with those kids. So this is why the hybrid model was more attractive to us. We believe we can offer a higher level of academics as well as address what we feel has been missing quite a bit, which is those social and emotional aspects of school and that the students might need as part of those cohort groups. So that's what led us to this one.
Yeah, and then to balance the other side of that, the idea of coming back fully, I think maybe this is a misspeak, but I feel like in order to accommodate concerns and fears, I guess, we can't social distance a classroom of 26 students, I guess is what I'm trying to say. And so I feel like the way to come back and do it safely, we know that masks and social distancing work. And so I feel like this is the way that you can get 50%, or it'll be less than 50% because you'll have a percentage of students that are going to be fully remote as well. But, if you're reducing the population in the building, you're limiting interaction between different classes or cohorts. They're going to have lunches in their classrooms, those sorts of things, then you're sort of mitigating a lot of the risks, and you're allowing people to make a choice to have their children come back into a safer environment, in my mind, than if we were, fully in. I think it would be a lot harder and impossible in some cases to traffic in the hallways and have, the desks far enough apart in the classrooms and that sort of thing. And so that's the other side of the, where we land in hybrid.
Thank you so much, guys.
Okay. Other comments on hybrid model or daily structure, that kind of thing? I think maybe after that we could move on. Go ahead.
The one comment I had is I also worry about the equity piece around the independent saddle day, but it sounds like you guys are very much considering how to identify which kids are going to need extra support and putting that support into place proactively so that we don't create those larger gaps or leave kids on their own learning who don't have any support or way to make that happen. And so I'm appreciative that you're being forward thinking in identifying those needs.
I think even above and beyond the academic needs, the Health and Wellness Committee that was part of this larger SAU team produced a really thorough document, and a lot of that was also identifying social emotional needs and implementing. There's a whole system of how to go about identifying them, how to kind of respond to those issues. I know that some of the communication that we've received was from parents, you know, kind of really hoping for an in-person option, was concerned not as much with their students' academics, but how they dealt with remote learning outside of school. You know, I think a couple of the things that we received were, you know, my students still got A's, but this did not work for us, and they feel and that, you know, so there's more to it than academics, and I think that the committee is really aware of all of these things.
I really appreciate that. And would we be able to see that document, the SEL document? That would be excellent.
Yeah, I can make sure that, or someone, Scott or Nate can make sure that all of them get sent. There was each of the subgroups from the SAU committee has a document, operations, facilities, health and wellness.
I believe you have. I believe those have already been provided.
I thought they were too, but maybe we can send it again just so that they're on the top of the email.
That would be great. Thank you. I appreciate all the work, you guys. It's incredible.
And that, I will say that that document was also included in the overall plan. So I took a lot of the excerpts from that, as well as some more specific information from our Nottingham specific crew, and included that in the section under student support, family and educator wellness. There are some pieces that still have to be added.
Yep, I have that part.
Yeah, there's some areas that have to be added to that were in greater detail in what Christine's talking about, like the red flag program and other things. So this is something I think we'll see our guidance team working more on to develop what that might look like, including with the teachers in class, assistance for kids, not just identifying areas where they might need some social, emotional, or mental health breaks, but also, how we can encourage more proactive support for the kids.
And the trauma-informed work you guys have done will be paramount to that. And also being aware of the social and emotional needs of our staff will be really important.
I couldn't agree more about trying to keep our staff going. It's been last spring, I marveled at how awesome they were and how well they adapted. But I know it took a toll on folks. And it's another reason why they want to see their kids again. I mean, we don't do this because we want to hide behind a computer screen. So I think seeing the children is going to be a big boom for them. But we want to make sure that the workload is manageable and that we can mitigate as much of their stress as possible. So I appreciate you saying that. That's a big goal of ours.
Well, we certainly do not want to burn out our teachers, because then we'd have no one to help our students. But I really appreciate all the work on the social emotional aspects that you people have considered, not only for the students, but for the staff as well. It's an incredible amount of work, and it is very much appreciated.
Okay, so I feel like we can still discuss this model and the details of it, but I think we should also try to move on a little and maybe discuss some of the other details of the proposal. I don't know if people want to have anything specific they want to talk about. I was thinking maybe masks would be important to the community and understand what our mask policy or procedures would be. Review, I believe what the proposal said is masks will be required for everyone when in any communal space. So us coming in, leaving in the halls and the bathrooms, those kinds of things, whenever 3 to 6 feet of distance and the desk shields can be used, but then allowing opportunities for mask breaks, as well as opportunities if they're sitting independently in the classroom, for students anyway, to be able to take their masks off when they're sitting with their desk shield, to allow them opportunities to do that. Now, in my mind, what I would like to see, maybe not as much policy, but perhaps in communication, would be that the expectation, especially for maybe grades 4, 5 and up, for the students that are ages 10 and up, to be to wear a mask as much as possible and take breaks when you need to. And then maybe for the younger grades, allow a little bit more time when and opportunities for them to have them off. Is in my mind, I like that idea, is just the data that shows that children 10 and over can share the disease as much like adults do. And it's the students that are younger than 10 who are likely to be, I can't even think of the words, but just to be sharing the disease. So that's my mind. But the proposal is basically, masks for everyone when moving, and then having opportunities to remove them when it's appropriate. Masks for staff all the time, but also acknowledging that they too will need mask breaks. So also providing opportunities for them to have mask breaks when they're not, maybe with their students or that sort of thing. And then also any visitors would be required. I mean, we're going to try to limit visitors to only essential, but any visitors that would be coming in would also be required to wear masks. So does anyone want to comment questions about masks?
What about visitors who say that for medical reasons they can't wear a mask?
Well, I think there's always going to be exceptions to every rule, and we'll deal with the exceptions as they come up. But certainly I would advocate that they not be allowed in the building. It depends what their purpose is for coming into the building. When we have visitors or guests dropping and picking kids up, we can dismiss from the vestibule as well as in front of the building. So we can certainly limit access, and that's our overall goal, is to limit people, limit the access from cohort to cohort, and that's why we're going to be limiting visitors. If they don't have a mask, then I guess it will depend on why they're coming and where we will help to mitigate that.
What about people who say that they want their children to be in school or in the building, but they won't make their kids wear masks?
I think it's the idea of the policy that that's not an option. Have masks available if students come to the building and forgot them, or if someone has a mask and it breaks and they need something. But I think the idea will be that this is the policy, and if you that a mask is not the right choice for your child, which is absolutely respectable and a fine decision, but that would then require you to participate in the remote learning option. Chris, do you agree with that?
I agree. Yes.
I agree.
We're looking at putting this plan together, and if we're going to be requiring masks, it means require. And certainly I think what Christine mentioned about, and within the plan, there's some reasonableness where we are trying to build in other additional safety precautions for students to remove their masks and take breaks and still follow the CDC recommendations. But our default is to wear masks, because we know that social distancing and masks are the #1 recommendations by the New Hampshire Department of Human Services and the CDC. So that's really the underlying bedrock of this plan when it comes to spreading the disease.
I know that we had
Thank you.
talked about this briefly. I'm glad we're having an opportunity to really talk about it and have community here. But at one point, the state was not going to provide, and I believe I heard from the governor that they will now assist us. Have you heard anything about that with masks?
They're not going to be providing us any personal protection. They have provided us avenues to purchase them less expensively. But we asked in the plan that due to the nature of masks being such a personal item, that parents provide them. We will have disposable ones available for those moments where people forget them. But the recommendation is to have a cloth mask, and we're certainly can help with our staff. But for the students, we're asking the parents to provide those. I know I've had some outreach from some community groups, such as the Nottingham Women's Club, to do some mask drives to help support families in need who don't already have masks. And certainly that'll be something that we can take on a case-by-case basis if there are some families who are really struggling to provide their students, their children with any kind of safety device or masks, et cetera.
Have we purchased, as a school district, the N95s for teachers?
We do have some N95s for teachers. We also have some other materials that we're purchasing to provide them. But yes, and our goal is including cloth masks. I actually met with a doctor, and we are looking at a new style of face mask to be utilized in the classroom. Even though you can still be 3 feet apart, but you want them to see your face. Just some other measures of protection as well. Our goal is to provide our staff with whatever tools they need to fit within this plan.
Thank you.
Another piece of the mask wearing that we discussed was training for staff, and then them transferring that training to the students about proper mask usage and how to take it off. And that involves a lot of hand washing and disinfecting of the hands and what you do with it and when you take it off, and all of those things. So again, like PD for teachers, and then, you know, helping the students understand the procedures and policies and things. And then just reiterating what Chris said earlier about how a lot of our classrooms have sinks in them, so we can sort of prioritize hand washing and use hand sanitizer in between. You know, I personally had concerns about the amount of use of hand sanitizer for our students and staff, and how often we're going to be using it. So I love the idea that we'll be able to have hand washing stations in the majority of our classrooms as well, so that students can also be washing their hands too.
One quick thing that comes to mind for me is that I think we should leverage our new website. We haven't really had an opportunity to do that fully because, you know, as soon as it was up and running, we were pretty much out of school. But I think some of these, we could put some videos on there with proper mask, hygiene, things like that. It would be a great place for one stop for families to be able to come in and really see information around all of this in one spot.
Agree.
Agreed. Great communication tool.
Okay, anything else anyone wants to discuss around masks? Okay. How about the start of the school year calendar? I think that's another important piece we should discuss today. I know Chris has a proposal to at least push the start for students returning until the following week, allowing the teachers to have 5 full days of PD at minimum. And I know that the committee was fully supportive of that idea. The idea of possibly pushing it a few days further to, you know, allow maybe even an additional couple of days, I think was met with mixed reviews in terms of, you know, is 5 enough? It probably is for some, but maybe some other teachers may need more, especially in terms of technology and that sort of thing. So I think for me personally, to decide what the right thing is, it's really difficult without knowing exactly what PD we want to present. I would never advocate for less personal development time. However, I want it to be effective and useful. And so I feel like the 5 days is like a definite, in my personal opinion, my mind. I think that's a great idea. And then I wonder if the additional 2 days would be better saved for maybe a month in, like maybe after we've been going at it for a while, people might want a couple of days to say, oh, this is what I really needed to learn, or these are the things that I need to address. And so that's just a thought in my mind. Anyone else?
I don't think anyone would be opposed to professional development. I'd like to hear a little bit more about what is proposed for that. What exactly are you proposing doing with that 5 days?
I think, and I'll let Chris answer that, but I do think at least part of that will depend on what we decide today. If we decide we're going fully remote, those 5 days look a lot different than if we decide we're doing this hybrid model with the idea that we may be fully remote at some point. So that's my only thought on that. But Chris, you can speak to that probably more specifically.
Well, just in general. So our staff are going to have to come in and set their classrooms up just like they normally would and prepare their lessons. And that's normally a full day and a half, 2 days worth of PD work. Quite frankly, that's even tight for them, and oftentimes come in on their own to do that work. But we also, we need to make sure that we are presenting the communication plan to staff, to families. We have to be looking at making sure and creating schedules. If we do this hybrid, we're going to be recreating our schedules, including our intervention schedules and when we're going to be meeting with certain students. We have to make sure that we are training staff on any new technology materials that we're getting, such as the camera that I was using here, and some of the lapel mics if we need to utilize those as well. Our assessment schedule has to be hammered out. We have to review our new health and safety protocols. We have some new staff that we want to orient to that, and then have them help, because having a new nurse is certainly going to be, hitting the ground running with this. And so getting her up to speed and getting her input and her take on how we're going to be training staff. There's the typical trainings that we normally would do on relevant policies and procedures that are not related to COVID-19, such as bullying, harassment, mandated reporting. We do want to review new policies such as the dress code as well with staff. Our accountability and attendance protocols are going to be shifting. We need time for teachers to create those, and then can we manage them? And then do we have the technology systems around that to support it? Our special education teams are going to need time to look at those plans and follow the state requirements of how they have to address them based on whatever changes we're making. There's the technology training, suicide prevention, our meal planning, and trying to schedule how we are going to provide meals and how we're going to watch them and supervise, looking at recess and how that may be scheduled. Teams are going to want to meet to discuss how they're going to schedule their cohorts and how they're going to be able to work together. So there's a lot of team time built into this PD question. And of course, there's the review of remote and distance learning. What is that? The distance learning is going to be new for our staff as well. In that sense, how is that being trained, and how we're going to utilize some of that time in the beginning of the year to reinforce the feedback that we get from parents around the remote instruction, that they're looking for something that's more scheduled, and some of the accountability pieces and some support and structure for them. Again, reviewing what blended learning is, flipped learning, and some of the materials management. Remember, now we have a lot of curriculum adjustments to do as well. If we are reducing shared supplies, our science teachers and our UA teachers that require that are going to have to make some serious shifts in how their instructional practices are given. Our library, how are we going to be structuring kids taking out books? It's okay to take out a book, but then we have to bring the book back and put it in quarantine, for lack of a better term, for at least over the summertime. They told us 3 to 5 days minimum. So it's all those pieces. Plus, we have to learn how to put on masks and take them off appropriately. We have to then figure out how we're going to be teaching that, and where we're going to be storing those pieces. So all those little details that, quite frankly, we haven't even thought of yet. I think when we get our 90 staff members together, they're going to have a lot of questions and ideas that are going to come up that we're going to be, oh yeah, we didn't think of that. Let's work on that. I do like the idea that Christine mentioned about putting some PD time, or realizing that during the year we may be needing some more PD time for staff. I know we have a teacher workshop on October 13 as one of those days. Who knows, that may be an extended 2 days as well, but that's an interesting idea. But that's a brief rundown of some of the things in my mind that we need to be covering and supporting our staff when they get back in those first few days of school.
So what I just want to clarify what you're maybe proposing as an idea, it's like for a starting point, would be extending PD through the Monday and Tuesday of the first, so August 31st and September 1st, having students start on the 2nd. And so learning days would be 2, 3, 4, with possibly one of those being remote. And then, or possibly not, because the details haven't been decided. And then the following week, we would have Labor Day off, which is the 7th, and then possibly close for voting on the 8th. So we would have student learning days on 9, 10, 11. Is that what you're suggesting?
Yes.
Okay.
And there's some obviously permutations around that. Like I said, currently we have the 4th off of September for Labor Day weekend. If we were going to be taking the 8th off for voting day, you know, one of the options I think Scott had mentioned was swapping that day out.
So it's still a 4-day weekend, but we're accommodating the voting, but we're still a learning day. Yeah. Okay. Any thoughts on that, board? Because we'll need to vote on a calendar, I think, right?
I support that idea. I think it's wise.
I think it's less disruptive and I like it.
So the last idea, I guess, is just we're going to do that 5-day. That's what we're advocating. I support the professional development fully. I would love to hear some community input, I guess, before we do any final votes.
Right.
I agree with that. Absolutely.
Okay.
So do I.
Okay, so other details of the plan that people want to discuss, be thinking of that. I think we need to probably get to public comments soon. I want to just reiterate a couple things. One was that there are details in the plan around what do we do if someone becomes symptomatic in the building, and where do we isolate, and how do we manage that. There are details about what to do if you're symptomatic or if you've been exposed to someone who, you know, may have COVID and those types of things. I'm just not sure if there's any other details the board would like to discuss before we open it up to public comment.
I feel like there's so many things that I don't know. And I don't think that, I can't speak for anyone else, but I feel like as we go forward and we see how things are going after the first week or second week, I feel like we're going to need to talk about these things again, because some things that we think are going to work really well may not work as well. We haven't been in this situation, so I feel like we're making plans, but at the same time, I feel like we're kind of making plans a little bit in the dark, and I think that we'll need to retool after a week or two. Not completely, but I think that we'll definitely need to refine and be open to going back and changing some things. So it's for me to comment so much.
Yeah, I do think that as we're releasing the plan, making sure that we're communicating that every piece of it is subject to change, and a lot of it probably will, is important, just so that people understand that. And I think people do understand that it's an ever-changing situation, and so our response has to be ever-changing as well.
I 100%.
Sue, did you want to say something too?
No, I'm just listening at this point. I'm looking forward to teacher and community input, and I agree that we should probably look at our agendas and consider this at every meeting very specifically. And I'm happy that we have the opportunity to look at some details at this point. So I don't think I'm fully ready to make any final decisions at the moment, but I'm happy we are seeing something at this point.
Okay, so is the board ready for some public comment?
Yes.
Okay, Chris, do you want to say anything before we move
Yeah.
No, I think it's been a great discussion so far, and I realize that the community doesn't necessarily have the document in front of them, or if they're not on YouTube, they may not be able to see everything that we presented. So I encourage them to ask questions. You did a nice rundown of kind of the table of contents and the areas that we have hit. As far as the calendar goes, I think there's some middle ground with that too. I love your idea of maybe saving a day or two. So even if we said we're not going to go back to school until September 1st, looking at leaving the calendar as is and just having it go that way, that gives the month of August that we normally would be in school as the staff time, which is 6 PD days for them to work, would be a nice start. And to Roz's point, and I've mentioned it several times in the plan about it being a dynamic, somewhat fluid document, that would allow us, like you mentioned, a couple PD days later on when we realize that we do have to shift and pivot a bit. So.
Yeah, I like your idea of extending that October 13th and maybe having that be a 2-day. That would be cool. Because even if we don't change plans, I think after teachers have been in the classroom for a few weeks, they're going to understand that even just some of their procedures, you know,
Absolutely.
communication and all of that. So, okay, so moving into public comment, I guess I'll just say that there's a lot of public. So our policy is, I think it's 2 minutes to related topics. And so whoever the host is, I'm not sure, will call out the last few digits of your phone number unless your name is on our screen, in which case they can use your name. If you don't have any comment, you can say no comment. If you do, please limit your comment to 2 minutes if at all possible, just so we can get through this timely. Also, if you don't want to speak publicly, but you want to share, you can always email the board and or Mr. Sousa. When you use the school board email address, that goes to the 5 board members and the superintendent. Okie dokie. I think we're ready to roll. Who's host? Is it Nate?
Yes, I took back over the hosting responsibility. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to go ahead and start with the names first because those are up front on the screen. I'll call out just the first name or any initials that are there. And then when I get to the phone numbers, I'll be calling out the last 2 digits of your phone number. And please, again, if you're going to make a public comment, please restate your name, address, and then go forward from there. Okay, so I'm going to go ahead and unmute Christian first.
Christine.
Christine, sorry, I'm sorry. Yep.
Oh, that's okay. Hi, Christine Kennedy from 11 Smoke Street. I did have a couple of comments, but before I get into that, I first of all, I appreciate all of the options that you all have put together and brought forward. And I think that it's very clear that they've been very well thought through. One thing that stuck out to me when we started having the conversation around Saddle and the distance learning days and concern about how to facilitate group sessions. I work in the technology field, and through this COVID crisis, you know, we've rapidly moved folks to work from home, but we've also implemented a lot of technology around those types of breakout sessions using things like Zoom and Miro. And I'm just curious in terms of like what technology support we have in order to explore some of those options to make and enrich the home learning environment using some of the newer technology. So that's one comment. The other comment is more around how you're determining who's going to be in the building at what time or what days. And I recognize that, you know, you were looking at the alphabetical order, and you know, as a parent with two kids in 2 different grades, one of the things that comes to mind is if it's not going to be based on last name, you know, what will I have to balance in terms of workload to try to get my kids that are potentially on 2 different schedules in the buildings on the days they need to be there.
If I could briefly maybe respond, if that's okay.
Yeah, Chris, I'll have you just respond to everything unless it
Okay.
seems more appropriate otherwise. Go for it.
So the technology aspects of it, I think that's a bigger question. But yes, I think technology itself has grown leaps and bounds over the last few months in our country. And we've been able to utilize a lot of new softwares, to help support the teachers in the classroom, including Zoom. We use Zoom specifically. Well, all the grades use it to some extent, but that also Google Meets, because it really works well with the upper school kids who are on Google Classroom. So we see continuing using those platforms, but we also want to make sure that we're limiting the number of platforms. I had a conversation yesterday with our tech director about coming up with either a single sign-in system or a place where we can put all of the areas where people need to sign into and into one area where people are, or maybe a website that parents can see. We have to make this user-friendly for the person who's that technophile to the person who's never barely turns on the computer, and that's been one of our biggest struggles.
Yeah, I understand that, and I don't mean to cut you off, but there are like the breakout functionality within Zoom, and I'm just wondering, can we explore more of that to support that learning and to support the teachers who know that the kids need some breakout sessions and they can pop into different sessions via Zoom that way. Just some ideas on what distance learning might look like. I know as a parent this past spring, it was really difficult having such limited contact with the teachers. And so, you know, I know the kids are really needing that.
Yeah, well, and again, that speaks to the reason why we were looking at that hybrid motion plan to bring kids in to have that contact with the teacher. We did look at some breakout sessions, but we can't have students in rooms without an adult. And so what taxes us, of course, is making sure we have enough staff to work within those groups. And we learned that we did later on in the spring, have our paraprofessionals really jump in and even run some of those meetings more. So that's definitely, I mean, you're spot on that we want to create avenues, and if technology can help us with that, that we can get more contact with adults and teachers and students. That's a big priority for us. As far as the scheduling of parents or families coming in, Christine, that is our number one priority. And the reason why I think I utilize last names in all the conversations around this to just emphasize the fact that we want to be structuring this around families, because this has to be doable. As I mentioned, it has to be a workable solution, but that's not just for our staff, it's also for our families. And with 2 kids, and maybe there's some families that having separate schedules would work. I have 2 kids myself. I would find that to be a struggle. So we're going to try and make sure that families have the same schedule, regardless of what grade their kids are in. That's our number one priority. And then we'll differentiate around the other academic considerations as we go.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Also, just wanted to add, sorry, there's a spider. It got away. Okay. Also wanted to add that in terms of the technology piece, that's a large part of the PD that will be happening in those first few days, is that, you know, varying levels of comfort with technology at this point. And so getting everybody to a point where they're comfortable using all of those options is going to be a priority.
Yeah,
Is there any funding in terms of additional funding for technology during these times to at least have, you know, maybe folks come in and train the teachers on the various functionalities within the tools that we're using within the school system?
So we do have some funding for professional development from some federal grants, and our community and our school board have been very generous with prioritizing technology and software acquisition over the last few years. So we've been able to really, you know, create a culture around that. But there are certainly some staff members who are more comfortable than others, and we need to create a baseline of acceptability on how technology is utilized and hold everybody accountable to that baseline. There may be some that go up and above that, but we need to figure out what that baseline is. And yeah, we're going to use some federal grant monies for training. And quite frankly, we have some very, very skilled teachers, and I'm hoping to capitalize on their expertise as well, and see if they can help train, and you know, if we can wind up offering them some extra funding for doing that training, then that would be wonderful. Thank you.
Nate,
Am I okay to move on?
yes, please.
Okay. I'm going to go ahead and unmute BSB.
Yes, good morning. Brendan Baer, 12 Sophia Way. Thank you so much, Mr. Souza. And thank you to the board members for the presentation. No doubt, I'll echo what Christine mentioned. There's no doubt that the time, the energy, and the passion that you guys have put forth is nothing but stellar. So thank you so much. Speaking on behalf of all the parents here in Nottingham and the children, you guys are doing a tremendous job. Thank you so much for all your efforts. Quick question. We started touching upon it just a little bit. I don't know if I got all the detail that I wanted. In regards to the big what if. What if we start going down this road of a hybrid model? Kids are starting to go into school, and we start to see our numbers in the town rise. And God forbid if a student or faculty members, staff do acquire COVID-19, has there been a protocol set do we all shift to a remote only until we clean, do a thorough cleaning? Has there been any other plans, discussions, or protocols around that?
We have some protocols laid out, particularly around cohorts and individuals in the building, should they be diagnosed or suspected of having COVID-19. I have given a lot of thought to the need for refining those plans and having our medical team or our school nurse and whatever resources we can get through them to help us. The New Hampshire Department of Human and Health Services has been really generous. They will help take over when it comes down to if somebody does have a diagnosis. They have their own plans and they'll come in and help us with it to help follow some of those pieces. But as far as a large scale, that shift that you're talking about, the protocols around, do we close the school and go back to remote? We have not, that's not in this plan. We have not necessarily created any protocols around that. I think what we're doing is preparing our staff and our students ahead of time. Well, we hope to, again, with those PD days, to realize that we may have to pivot in that direction. How that decision gets made is yet to be discussed. That's certainly a school board level, and SAU and even the state government is probably going to offer some type of guidance around that. But frankly, I expect us to see an increase in the state of New Hampshire in the COVID, and to see what that would look like. I'm not sure for Nottingham. Right now, we've seen the state give us guidance that says pretty much communities can do what they want. So we'll have to see how Nottingham responds to this. But I want parents to understand that we're putting a measure in place that's going to do what we can to reduce exposure, but in no way is going to eliminate exposure as we move forward.
Great, excellent, yep.
I'd also like to add that I would fully expect that before we open, there will be some more specific guidance around when we close and those sorts of things. And a lot of those things have been done in other places. I know Maine has a color-coded system based on number of cases and those sorts of things. I know there's a study out of Harvard that also has the same sort of level. So it's, you're monitoring daily and weekly, and then there's certain thresholds and there's cutoff points and those sorts of things. So I don't think we have to reinvent the wheel on that. I think we can look at the plans that are out there that are well done and take from them what we think would work for us as well.
Yep, no, outstanding. And just as a quick follow-up, despite the direction that the school takes at any given time, based upon what you presented today with the hybrid platform, do the families have the ability to shift? So as a father and as, and my wife, we look at, okay, what the situation is. Do we have the ability to shift to the remote only, mid-school term, regardless of what the school is going to do? Do we have that ability to shift as a family member?
Well, I would say that you always have that ability.
Okay.
Overall, we're asking families for planning purposes, asking management to make a commitment at the beginning. But if all of a sudden October comes, the end of our quarter is the end of November, early December, and October comes and you're feeling very unsure about sending your children to school, then I would hope we would engage in conversations with the staff, the teachers, the parents, so that we could help with the transition to remote learning if that's the path you want to go.
Okay, great. I appreciate that. Thank you. I just wanted to make sure there wasn't a full commitment, all in, so on and so forth. I was pretty sure that was I just wanted to make sure, and in case anybody else had it on their mind. That's all I had. Again, I just want to reiterate, thank you so much for all of your support, all of your brain power and efforts around this. It's a beast. It is an absolute massive undertaking. And thank you again for all your help.
You're very welcome, and good questions. Thank you.
Okay, Diane, I'm going to go ahead and try to unmute you.
Diane LaFlamme, I'm a paraprofessional. I really have no comment. The only thing I can say is I would go for the hybrid model. I mean, I really agree with that. If the kids slowly back into school and the teachers and I want to say thank you for all that you are doing for us, everyone. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Janice? I've unmuted you.
Yep, I'm all set. Thank you.
Thank you. Lisa?
No comment.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Jennifer?
Hi, this is Jen Byron for Sophia Way. Again, thank you to all of you for I think that excellent thought and time that you've put into evaluating options and doing the research. As a parent, it just really makes me feel secure and proud that I am in a district that with people just working so hard as you have. I'm very supportive of the hybrid model. I think it's a very good way to start. I love the fact that, you know, my daughter might be able to get in school and see her teachers and see her friends a couple of days a week, but it still seems safe enough, you know, with social distancing and just reducing the number of people that are in contact with each other. So I think it's a great plan to move forward with. I'm also very supportive of the extra professional development days to make sure that the teachers and staff are as comfortable as they can be in navigating this new world. So I really support the delayed start and whatever time that they think is required to get as many resources and as much advanced preparation as they can. One of the challenges that I'm thinking ahead, and I don't really know how to answer this, but this year I'm going to have one student in Nottingham and one in Dover High School. So trying to anticipate how the plans for the different institutions might align when it comes to things like scheduling and transportation, trying as much as I can I want to be able to drive my kids and not have to utilize and be a drain on the bus system. But with two different schools in the mix, I'm not entirely sure how that's going to work. And I know everybody is developing their plans, but it's just a concern I have now that this is the first year that we don't have both kids in the same Nottingham school. So that's just going to be a challenge, I'm sure, for our family and others that have one in Nottingham or more, and then one or more in high school as well. So again, thank you. I think this plan and the conversations that are happening are just really incredible. And thank you for your support.
Thank you. I have to say I completely agree, and I think it's an excellent idea to make sure if we are asking parents to provide transportation whenever possible and encouraging parents to provide transportation to minimize those that are on our bus, that it will be important for us to make that workable with the high school schedules as well. So thank you for that.
Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, I'm going to go ahead and start calling out the last two digits or three digits when necessary. So last two digits, 81, please state your name and address if you have a public comment.
Hi, this is Lena Hool, first grade teacher. And I just wanted to say thank you for everybody's hard work in this. I know it's not easy, and I definitely have a lot of questions, but I think those will be answered as time goes on. So that's it. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Lena.
Okay, last three digits on this one because we have another 7-3 number, 773.
Hi, Michelle Janot. I teach sixth grade, and no comments at this time. Thanks.
Thank you. Last two digits, 33.
Karen Kenny, 61 Garland Road. No comment.
Thank you. Last two digits, 18.
No comment.
Thank you. Last two digits, 43.
Hi, my name is Marianne Kachukis, and I live at 55 Four Farm Road. I just also want to thank everyone for all the hard work that they've done. I was curious, I understand that even though the majority of parents and the teachers want to go back full time, I understand looking at the hybrid. I think one of the most important things is the preciousness of every day that those kids can be in school, regardless of how their grades are. A lot of the kids really need that time in school and to get that effective education as well as the social part. I'm curious of if you're going to go with the hybrid, why you couldn't do 2 days one week and 3 days the next week, and I understand you'd be sanitizing the school on Friday, I feel like the school should be open for the students Monday through Friday, even if it meant having to hire someone to sanitize on the weekends or sanitize, you know, third shift or something. It just seems that like those days are so precious that if you could do the sanitizing not during the school day, it would give the kids an extra day every other week. The other thing I was curious about is what a lot of people are craving is kind of that ritual and of and structure of going to school. Is it seems, if you looked any further at the half a school day for everyone, so that way even you have eyes on your kids every day. I feel like going to school for 2 days and having 5 days off, it's like a little mini summer slide every week. And again, it's an opportunity for the equity to get to be less for a lot of the students. So I was just curious what the limits are. It seems to me a half a school day for all the kids would be the best scenario for the kids because they're able to get into school, and again, the teacher's getting eyes on them.
So thank you, Marianne. So those options for what type of hybrid model we discussed not only by this committee, but also a committee of, briefly anyway, discussed via the email and meetings as to say what would be manageable and how we could actually run the school, not just around the idea of disinfecting and cleansing, although that certainly is part of it, but also the idea of trying to manage what our days are going to look like. For instance, we're reducing time, which means, but we still have a lot of responsibility based in some of those days, particularly for those classroom teachers. And looking at our personnel, particularly if we're operating on a limited personnel, how are we going to be doing our supervision work? For instance, around lunchtime coverages, recess coverages, still giving teachers time to plan and prepare their lessons. Trying to balance it. We looked at it as a 10-day cycle. How can we balance it? It really came down to this 5-day cycle in the end for us that could be workable for staff. And this is where the 5-day, the 4-in-1 came out into these various plans. Oh gosh, what else are you asking? So anyway, so that's
well, as far as having a whole day for cleaning and disinfecting, is there a way that it seems like there should be other more flexible ways so that you could, you know, if the kids could go 3 days one week and 2 days the next week, that's still an extra day that they're getting that.
So I have a couple of things on that, Chris. I don't know, is that okay with you?
Yeah, I can appreciate the comment. I don't have anything else to add.
So I think that the committee ruled out the half-day option, not ruled out, but decided it wasn't our preference for a couple of reasons. One, transportation costs would double at least because you'd have to have transportation in the middle of the day, but also the time in between the morning session and the afternoon session doesn't really allow for a full cleaning. And I know that we're saying we're disinfecting on Fridays, but that's not the only time we're disinfecting. So if you have a cohort in on Monday and then a different cohort in on Tuesday, there's a cleaning crew working overnight or in those evening hours, so that there's still disinfecting in between the cohorts. And so if you have a morning and an afternoon cohort, there really isn't the time to do that. So that was two of the large.
Yeah, that totally makes sense. That totally makes sense.
For that one. In terms of the 2 days a week and 3 days a week, I'm not sure. I don't specifically remember fleshing that out as a committee, but I know that I did in my mind. And I love the idea for some reasons, but I fear, my concern personally with that plan is manageability for families because their days will change every week. So one day it would be Monday, Wednesday, Friday. The next week it would be Tuesday, Thursday. So in my mind, that's not an out of the question idea. It's just a question of what would serve the community best. And I don't know if I have that answer. I don't have that answer.
Well, and what if you had like Monday to like, so the one group goes Monday, Wednesday, they go every Monday, Wednesday, the other group goes every Tuesday, Thursday, and then it was a matter of every other Friday that group could go.
Yeah, that is a possibility. I've definitely considered it in my mind. Chris, do you have any specifics on that, or is that something that we're still like?
Only that, you know, there's probably 100 different permutations of how we could organize this. Yeah. And I think there's a lot of pluses and minuses to all of them. But at some point in time, based on the group of people making these decisions, we have to land on something. And considering that at this point in time, Marianne, we're in that phase 2, that we're taking a more cautious look at how we might move forward. I see us getting into that phase 3. You know, if we, I envision, and again, I don't have a crystal ball, and I certainly have never been a doctor. But you know, should we have a spike in cases, but then should we overcome that? And as we move in throughout the school year, I'm hoping, I'm knocking wood, that we move into that phase 3, which would bring back kids much more to the building. You know, if we could reduce the distances and the mask requirements, or at least to some extent, and maybe it is exactly what you said, that at that point in time, we're ready to increase the number of days, even on a hybrid schedule. I would love to see us move into phase 3 sooner than later. I think everyone would. But that's that dynamic piece that I can't foresee, but I'm just hoping for.
Chris, can I add one more thing to that? As a board member thinking about this, we want to make sure our teachers have, they're going to be asked to go into the classroom and teach kids and then do remote and balance all that. And I think it's important that they have that Friday to meet with their teams and to update their remote and asynchronous lessons and to schedule. And that's just something I want to hold space for.
Yeah, I was trying to mention that, but I lost track in my thoughts originally, and Christine kind of steered me in a better direction. But
yes, and that's definitely a different scenario than just, because the way it's listed now, it just says you're disinfecting the building. So I totally agree with you. Like, if the teachers need more time to be able to juggle all of these things, then that's absolutely a credible reason.
Yes, as part of the Nottingham committee too, as Ms. Gordon said and Ms. Debrio said and Mr. Souza said, we did look at that Friday as a way for teachers to be able to provide more instruction and planning for their instruction, not just as a disinfecting.
Okay, that makes a big difference. Thank you.
Thanks for the feedback on that, Marianne, too. We have to explain that a little better.
Okay, so the next one, I'm going to go 3 digits because we did have a 7-3 already, and that's 573. If you have a public comment, please state your name and address. Okay, I'm going to go ahead and move on to the next one. 15.
No comment.
Thank you. Okay, next one I have listed as Belcher. I'm going to go ahead and unmute.
Hi, how are you? Can you hear me okay?
Yes.
Yes, hi. My name is on Oak Ridge Road. So I is for parents and kiddos who have disabilities. If
like the connection, I'm
choose
sorry.
like a hybrid option.
Hi, sorry. Excuse me. I'm sorry. I don't mean to interrupt you, but I feel like the connection is breaking up. Can you try? I'm not sure if you're, or maybe you don't have a good connection. Can you try again?
Sure. Hold on one second.
I can hear you now.
Can you hear me better now?
Yeah.
Yes. Thank you.
Can you hear me okay?
Yes. Now that's very clear. Go ahead. Thank you.
Okay. Thank you. Sorry about that. My main concern as a parent of a student with a disability is if we choose, I mean, regardless of what option we move forward, I feel like, unfortunately, kids that require more services than most are going to end up losing out on something, whether it's the social interaction piece or therapies. Do we have any idea yet what our goals are going to be for these kids to get their therapies if we were to go forward with the hybrid option? How can we assure they're able to get the therapies that they need to meet their goals in only 2 days, while also still participating in a classroom?
And thank you very much. That's a great question. And certainly one that I don't have all the answers to, and Nate certainly could jump in, but I think also we're going to be looking at our teaching staff, depending of course on who is coming back, is how we're going to be able to facilitate those pieces. That was also a consideration for us with that Friday. Is there a time that we could extend some of the in-person learning for those particular students, particularly around OT work and PT, which is a real challenge to do remotely?
Right.
Right. So, those are some of the question marks that we still have as to how we can ensure
Okay.
that those students are going to meet it. But again, one of the reasons we're looking at providing some time, and we'll need to know exactly who is going to be back in the building. That will also help us to come up with a plan.
Okay.
Additionally,
And then I guess,
oh, I'm sorry,
Go
go
ahead.
ahead. Okay, I was gonna say additionally when
oh,
this
no, you,
first, okay. Additionally, when this first started, we were under an emergency situation and it was very new and it was very difficult to be able to do group instruction online with special ed students because of the privacy required. However, the FERPA rules have changed because of this situation. And I'm going to be working with Mr. Souza, and Mr. Souza is going to be working with staff and trying to make sure that we are able to extend remote group lessons as well, as opposed to what we really did try to stick with was individual lessons for special ed students. But I find, and I've shared with the principals and the team that moving forward, now that we have a little bit better clearance on what's going on and understanding, we need to bring back the group even in remote so that they can work with each other even remotely.
mm-hmm. And I guess too, a lot of work that she does, I know, particularly in PT and OT, some of the social distancing rules, I guess, would have to be broken so that she can have like the physical contact that she needs in order to actually benefit from therapies. Is that something that you think is going to be, able to be promoted, I guess, is just being able to have physical contact when needed?
It's difficult for me to speak to that without knowing more about what the CDC and the New Hampshire DHHS, the guidelines are going to be around that, as well as the comfort of staff and how we can approach that. But I can say that when we can get people together to begin looking at that in more detail, our goal is to be as least restrictive as possible.
Okay, great. Thank you.
Thank you. I wish I had some better answers and some more clear answers at times. It's been mentioned several times today about that we're looking at this from this 5,000-foot view. And we know that there's going to be a lot more questions coming up when we get people together. So hopefully we'll have answers as we move forward for everyone.
Thank you.
Yeah, and those details are certainly not going to be overlooked or left out. I think it's priority top of mind. So.
Thank you.
Sure. All right, Nate.
Okay, I believe that's, hold on, I gotta shift because we've had more people jump in and out. Okay, last two digits of 25, last two digits 25.
Hi, it's Ellen LePaco.
Hi.
7th and 8th grade teacher at the school. I just wanted to say thank you so much to everybody who's put time into coming up with your plans, the hybrid models. I know you've included the staff in some of your decisions, and I really appreciate that. I still have a lot of concerns and questions, but I know that you as a group will continue working on that. And I would ask that you continue to ask for input from staff because it's just not easy. It's very stressful for me just not to know what's happening. That's really why I'm calling in or listening today, so I can get a better idea of, how is life going to change for me and the students. And I will say I'm thrilled to be able to get some face time with the students. I think for their social and emotional aspect as well as their academic. I know it's not all about the academics, and for me as well. I like to put faces, especially to the new students that are coming up, and it's really important for that. So again, I just appreciate your hard work and forward to hearing how we're going to proceed. Thanks.
Thank you, Ellen. I would say that as we develop these plans more and what comes out of today's meetings will be something that we want to get out and solidify and get out to staff and to the community as soon as possible. That way we can begin getting more people together to work on some of the more granular levels of this. I think we've seen time and time again in Nottingham that working together, we produce better results. I certainly think that that's been a hallmark of the work that we've done at every turn. This will be no different.
Thank you. Okay, we did have Chris join us later in. I'll go ahead and unmute him, and I think that will be everyone that's been in public. Chris, if you have a comment, you can please go ahead and state it.
Oh, sorry. I just finished up with summer school. I was just listening in to try to get to the end of the meeting. I was just listening to you guys. I'm good.
Okay, thank you, Chris.
Thank you.
Okay. So I think that was everyone, right, Nate?
That is correct. Everyone who has been in has spoken.
All right, so I want to thank everyone for their questions and comments. I think it's valuable to hear from the community. We've been in this for 2.5 hours now. I think we need to have some discussion and make some decisions. I think the goal would be to make some large decisions so that we can then, within the next couple of days, put some information out to the community saying this is what we want it to look like in the fall, and ask for those commitments, not just to the community, but also to the staff. Release the entire proposal with the understanding that things may change, but to give people sort of a structure so that they can make a decision for themselves with some, an educated decision. So I think we need to make a few decisions. My proposal for the calendar and the start date would be to let the community know that the start date will change and maybe in September, and then have a formal calendar at our August 5th meeting on which to vote. That's my proposal for that. Does anyone disagree? Would you rather make a decision today? I'm asking the board, which I can't see everybody.
That works for me.
I'm good with that as well.
I'm fine with that. I'm also fine with the delay to the 2nd and having the 5 days. So I would be prepared to approve that today.
Christy,
I would also be prepared to approve the 5 days as well.
Chris, do you have a preference? Would you like time to decide whether you want it to be the 1st or the 2nd, or would you prefer that we just do it now?
I mean, I think if everyone is committed to at least knowing that we have those 5 days, it's really about making sure that the community knows. I think that the staff is going to know that we at least have a week of solid planning and potentially through the 31st of August. I'd be comfortable if you wanted to put it to the 31st and we began school with the students on the 1st, but I think as long as we know we have that first week, we can wait to the 5th.
Okay. Is that the consensus for everybody else? I think for me, I'd rather wait until that day to vote so that we're looking at a document. We see the dates on the calendar. If you want to think about extending that October 13th PD date and put in a date there, that's my only thought on the voting piece. And then, but I do think, correct me if I'm wrong to the board, but I do think it's the consensus of the board that we agree with the idea of that first full week. And then, like I said, at least right now, communicating to the community so people can plan their lives, just letting people know that the start date will be at least September 1st, and there will be a firm date on August 6th after our board meeting. Anyone disagree? Okay, so that's our plan for that.
And just to add in, I think that's wise because we still need to talk about the town voting day.
Right.
Yeah.
Okay. So we'll put those on for, I guess I just wrote October, August 5th. Okay. Great. So I think the other piece that we need to discuss is, the hybrid and what is it that we want to communicate to the community. We want our fall school day to look, not school day, but school schedule, I guess, to look like.
Are you, I guess, are we being, I won't pick my word here. Are you suggesting that, or directing that you want the board to make a decision on the hybrid model today?
Well, I mean, it's obviously up to the board and what we want to do. My original thought was that this may take more than one meeting because it's a lot of information. However, I feel like if people are ready to make some decisions, it would be beneficial. When I look at the timeline, I know people want to start making plans, and I feel like what needs to happen next is we need to present to the community our best proposal that we can so that people can make an educated decision. And then people will send in their commitments, both staff and families. And then there's a lot of work to be done from that point on in terms of developing cohorts and deciding which days. And then I want to be able to turn that around and get it back to families so that they have enough notice to, you know, plan their own schedules. So my concern is the timeline, but I also wouldn't want to rush the board either. So it's up to the board.
Yeah, my thoughts on it are, you know, I have been concerned all along with the timing and the board, you know, having to wait to hear, to, you know, come to this point. I do not support saddle. I do support a hybrid. If we had talked before about this before, I would have said that I think we should try to get as many kids back into the school and determine where they stand at this point and make a lot of effort to try to get everybody caught up. And so, you know, I guess I would support the hybrid. I hear the parents as well. I think from what I can hear, looking for more structure. And we've got the majority of teachers and the majority of parents looking for a full return. So right now we're in a somewhat of a lull, although I'm mindful of every day looking at these numbers and seeing that there are students or children under the age of 18 included in the new cases. So it is, you know, I'm very mindful of that, but I will, of course, you know, vote accordingly, but I can appreciate that we want a hybrid model, but I do not agree with the saddle concept. And I would prefer to see as many students as possible getting the same education. So I think if we leverage our technology that we've made a commitment to over many years, that we could stream classes or have those students in the room and make whatever supports we need to do that so that we can have our remote kids and our in-class kids learning together.
Sue, may I ask what specifically, sorry.
That's all. I know I typically don't, I tend to be more the person that will bring up these types of things. So I apologize for that. I do respect everyone's efforts on this, but those are my thoughts.
You should never apologize for sharing your thoughts, Sue. But I think Ross had a
I'm not
question.
apologizing for sharing them. I'm apologizing for not necessarily agreeing.
Oh, you shouldn't apologize for that either.
I have to apologize all the time.
Ross has a question for you.
Christine, I don't like how you automatically laughed at that. That wasn't nice. No, Sue, can you tell us a bit more about what specifically about saddle? What is it that you don't agree with specifically?
I don't agree with the more detached asynchronous model for when students are out of the school. I'm concerned about the shortened day. I am and necessitated by having this sort of arrangement. I would prefer that all of our, I just think in the end, it would be easier for teachers to have a classroom where they're able to manage what's being delivered for everybody. Because if you've got kids being totally asynchronous or primarily asynchronous Monday and Tuesday, and then coming back into class, you know, the next 2 days, it just seems to me that it would be very difficult to maintain the some sort of organization around what's happening. You got kids that you just don't know necessarily what was going on for those 2 days. I'm not a fan of asynchronous. I know in speaking with the superintendent all throughout this, that also that was a thought that we would try to do as much as we could to keep kids on the same page throughout. And I know we can't deliver the same in-person education that we were, but I'm concerned about the lack of structure for the 2 days that the students are not in the classroom.
Sue, I hear what you're saying. I would say that I don't think it's actually technically correct to say that there's a lack of structure when it comes to asynchronous learning. I agree. Let me start off by saying I agree with you that it would be ideal to get everybody to be doing the same things at the same time. Unfortunately, I don't think it's possible because the teachers only have, not just the teachers, but everybody only has so much bandwidth. And sometimes literally it is also about bandwidth. I mean, like, so what happens? You're conducting a class and your connection fails. Then, there's nothing for you to go back and look at. I think that there's a flexibility that can be had when you have asynchronous learning. Again, I 100% agree with you that I wish that we could do it all at the same time and have students connecting with each other and their teachers at the same time. But I think that this gives us some flexibility. And I don't think that it necessarily has to lack structure. Universities for years have been doing courses using asynchronous learning, and I don't think that they would say that they thought that there was a lack of structure. I think that we just have to learn how to do, and I think that's exactly what the administration has been doing. I think they've been learning how to do this even better. I think that's what they've spent the summer doing. So I don't think asynchronous necessarily, I don't think you can necessarily say that there's a lack of structure. It's not the same, but I think that we have to get used to things not being the same.
So I have a couple of things too. Sue, I want to say that I don't disagree with you. And coming into this as a parent of, I had 3 students remote learning last year. I'm thinking of my own experience. I'm also thinking about the survey data that we got with a large number of comments coming in asking for more structure and clearer expectations and more synchronous learning, even though that wasn't always the language used. And I share your concern. So my hope is with this model, what we'll see is, for example, students coming in and being in person on Monday with direction given on what to do on Tuesday. And again, my hope is that we'll have enough staff to support, perhaps it's a paraprofessional, perhaps it's a UA teacher, perhaps it's a teacher that's home doing remote learning, 100% of the time. We don't know what that looks like yet, so the details are hard, but my hope is that there is still someone there to provide an element of structure. And I think that, and maybe I'm wrong in this hope, because I think it does sort of deviate from the model, the saddle model. But it would be my hope that we could provide some amount of face-to-face, via Zoom or whatever, interaction on those days and some amount of support and structure on those days. My other hope, and Chris, you can correct me if I'm wrong on this, but my other hope is that, because I also share the concern about shortening the day, and I want to better understand the desire to do that. But my hope is that if we're shortening the day and allowing time for the teachers each day to have more planning time and email time and checking in with students that are remote and those sorts of things, that fully remote day could be largely structured and largely synchronous. So really you're only having 2 days of what would be considered saddle that would be largely independent, but with hopefully some element of structure and support. you're having 2 days of fully in person that will not be together. It wouldn't be Monday, Tuesday in person, and then you're gone for almost a whole week. It would be like Monday, Wednesday, or Tuesday, Thursday, that sort of thing. And then the 5th day being remote with a large element of synchronous and scheduled time. Chris, what do you think about that?
Oh, I agree with it all. I think that it's hard to pin down what that Friday would look like without knowing more and getting into it and seeing what that last period of the day, that 50-minute period for staff to be interacting with students who have been home. Because obviously they would be interacting with the students who just get on the bus and go home. That time really set aside for those kids who have been in that saddle environment. But I also want to reiterate that this is phase 2 and we're easing into the building. And it doesn't mean if you want to alter phase 2 and get rid of something and go full in. I mean, I'm open to, we'll, address things as we can. But I think we came about this with a more conservative approach as to what's manageable for staff and for students. And that's where that came up. It's not a new concept, distance learning. And we use the acronym SADDLE, but it's really just distance learning. As Roz mentioned, at the college level, and again, my conversation with the Bedford admin, at the high school level, they've been using some of this for some of their, because they offered some online classes. Yeah, Friday will look to be as structured as it can be. I think we should be putting out structure for the students who are at home on those distance learning days as well. We talked a little bit about having our paraprofessionals. If we look back at our paraprofessional role back in the spring, many of them were running meetings and were running small groups with kids. So I envision having staff available to do that even on those days. While the work may be largely independent in nature, it's prescribed that way, such as in a flipped classroom, it doesn't mean that we won't be without some supports. And I think one of the recommendations we want to make to parents is to structure those days at home. I know that even in my case, I found that to be very important and very challenging. But if we would have put forth to parents, here's how we would like to structure the day, and then we could throw in some benchmark consistencies, such as a morning meeting every day at 8:30, and a check-in at 1:50, then that would help parents structure that day as well.
I also wonder, this just occurred to me now, I also wonder if we're shortening the day, if we shortened it on the other end instead and started later, if that would allow for teachers to maybe have a morning meeting with their remote students and remind them of what their goals are for that day. And that, just a thought.
No, that's a great thought. Again, some of those details have yet to be teased out.
So that was going to be what I was going to say next, is that I don't want to get too bogged down in discussing the details, because I think that our ultimate goal today is to determine the, as you put it, 5,000-foot view, so that we can at least get a schedule of sorts out there for families. And then as we know more about the details of who's coming back into the building, we can then work out the details of exactly what it looks like and what the daily schedule looks like, and those sorts of things.
I would like to I heard someone say it, and I've been thinking it all along. I really would like to get teacher feedback. I believe conservative is better right now. I don't know that I would support going in full on, even though I really, really want to, personally, as an educator and as a mother and as a board member. But I think that you're wise to ease into it. And I think that all the concerns are valid. But I want to hear what teachers are thinking about the distance day and how that would work, and if they're feeling like it's doable before but I think if I had to make a decision, I think this is the responsible decision right now, and how the details play out. I think we need a lot of input from the people who will be doing the detail work.
Right. Something else I wanted to point out was that I think a couple of people have mentioned today that, 50% of people stated that they wanted to come back fully. But I also want to remind people that the way that was worded was with proper safety precautions, would you be comfortable coming back fully? And as a person who answered that question, yes, I want my students back fully. I have to say that if we were 100% back fully after really looking at the numbers and figuring it out, I think I would change my mind knowing that they wouldn't be social distance in the classroom and the hallways would be more full. And I just feel like, we can't be back full time and offer all of the safety precautions that that are necessary. That's my thought. But I agree with you, Kelly. So I wonder, I am getting the feeling from the board that they're uncomfortable making decisions today and that they want more feedback from staff. And so I'm wondering from the board what the timeline looks like. Do we want to take the rest of this week to elicit feedback from staff and then convene again on Monday, make final decisions? That just pushes out when we get the commitments. I think our original goal was to get a commitment from staff and families by August 7th. So maybe if we're making decisions on Monday and releasing a plan midweek, then that pushes that out to August, 11th or 12th to give people time to digest it and make decisions. What's the board's pleasure on decision making?
Do we have I'm losing track. I've had so many meetings. Don't we have a meeting tomorrow?
We do not. I don't.
When's our next regular scheduled school board meeting?
No, next week.
For the 1st of August. Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
This month has 5 Wednesdays.
Yep, 1st and 3rd. I get it. I'll vote today. If the board wishes to. May I say one thing though? I
think we need to give parents as much time.
Okay, sorry. Go, Susan, go, and then we'll go to Roz after.
Okay. I think some of the things that I'm listening to and hearing are, I still have concern about the 2 days out. I don't know how teachers really feel about that. I think we have to take into consideration we're a K-8 school, and I think needs of students differ. So that's number one. So this method would be different for different grades, particularly middle school versus, the K through 3. And also certain subjects where you get into the upper grades and they're teaching more subject-oriented material. I hear all the conversation about colleges, but colleges also bring students in all together many times. So, there's a lot of difference between doing something at your own pace versus, coming in for scheduled class sessions. So anyway, I'm willing to vote today if that's the will of the board. I understand that the hybrid model is probably the best way to go. I think at this point, we're probably at the best spot we're going to be right now with the cases in this state, and it's going to get worse, and we'll likely have to switch to remote again. And so I think we should capitalize all we can on getting people back. And I am the board member. I think that everyone has been pushing hard to get information out to parents. So I am sensitive to that, but as this is structured, I don't agree with the asynchronous methodology, so I would vote against it. But that's just one voice, and we should probably just go ahead and vote if everyone feels that they don't mind getting the information in one meeting.
Well, I did hear one ask for more teacher feedback, so from Kelly. So I don't know that we're at the point where everyone is saying they want to vote right now.
Well, I would be prepared to vote on the model. What those remote days look like, I think is part of the details that would have to be worked out. And I think that's the part that I'd be ready to vote on which model though, remote or full or that.
Okay, and when you say that, are you comfortable with the proposed form of that model in terms of 2 days in? I think the actual sort of schedule is what parents will need to know.
Yeah, I am prepared to vote on that, the model that you've proposed, and then get feedback from staff and everything on how those days are used.
Okay, I agree with that. I also think that we need to present this to the community as our, I don't want to say hope, because that doesn't sound very like final, but it isn't 100% final. I think we need to say that this is really this is our goal. This is our ultimate goal in our decision today. And that we need those commitments. And then, you know, we may get these commitments back and find out that it doesn't work and it still might change. I don't anticipate that will happen, but I suppose that could happen depending on what we hear back from people. So talking about the model, let's just hear from each board member and whether or not you'd like to vote on just the overarching model today, or if you'd prefer to wait. Roz?
I would like to vote today on the model. I don't, from all of my reading and from reading the document that you guys have presented, as well as my reading of a number of other documents and looking at data, I don't think my mind will change on what we, on the model that we use, unless things were to get, you know, much worse over, and then I would say I would like to see us go to remote, but fully remote. I don't think that my mind will change over a week.
Okay.
So I'm prepared to vote today.
Thank you. Kelly?
I'm prepared to vote.
Okay. Sue?
I will vote today on the model. If the model includes the current structure of the remote days, then, you know, I guess I'd just like some clarity. And when the motion is made, we'll have more clarity on that.
Okay, I understand that. Kathy? Lost you on my screen. Is Kathy still with us? I think we lost her. Okay.
We did lose Kathy.
Okay. So do you want to have a little more discussion about the model? I mean, guess I'm proposing that we vote on the model presented, largely schedule, knowing that the details in terms of starting up, you know, like the time of day. I think the time of day for start and end times is unknown. I think the structure of the day in terms of block schedules and UAs, I think those things are unknown in this so far. I think the structure of the remote learning day is unknown, and I think the structure of the more independent at-home days is unknown. That's my thought. I don't know if we think that's enough to present to the community to get a commitment, or if you guys think we need to hammer out some of those details to get a commitment.
I'm not clear. If someone made a motion today that said it is the determination of the board after hearing the material presented from administration, that the return to school will be a hybrid model with approximately 2 days in class, 2 days out of the classroom, and 1 day, the fifth day, you know, structured however we structure it. Is that what you're proposing? Or are you proposing, yes, we'd like to do a hybrid model. This is the hybrid model that we're proposing. We have a lot of these unknowns, but right now we're going to send out this paperwork to you, and this is how these days would look. In other words, we're going to do this distance learning in this saddle mode.
I think the first thing you said is what I'm proposing. Obviously, anyone can make a motion that says anything, but I think giving people the daily schedule with all of the other precautions that come in this proposal in terms of mask wearing requirements and social distancing in classrooms and all of those other sort of like thoughts and conditions, safety precautions, if you will, so that people understand what to expect and will allow them to determine whether or not they are choosing to send their children in for the hybrid model or keep them home for remote learning. I think the details of all of the structure can be determined after we know more of who's coming. Does that answer your question?
It does, I guess. I have one other quick question. If kids do choose to be remote only, do we have a plan as to who will provide the teaching and the plans to the students, or would they be kind of on their own for the kids that don't come back?
I think the idea is for them to not be on their own. I think that we know that about 20% of our staff would like to be remote only. But I think in terms of exactly who and what that looks like will be determined when we find out exactly who wants to be remote and exactly which students want to be remote. I think what we saw was that the staff, that 20% was sort of sprinkled throughout the grade spans, as well as the percentage of students that want to come back or don't want to come back. And so I think the hope is that, and Chris, you should step in here if you want to, but I think the hope is that there will be teachers and staff that are largely in charge of the remote learning for the population of students who are doing the remote learning. But we have that broken down because we don't have those commitments yet.
Exactly. We don't really necessarily know what grades those teachers are representing. We have some span data, and we believe we can accommodate all of our students. At least that's our hope. But particularly with the older students, when you start getting into more discipline-based instruction, and certification issues, it's a challenge. But so remote staff, we want to support them or not remote staff, remote students and remote learning will support as best we can, utilizing what we anticipate will be some remote staff, whatever teacher teaming we can do here, if there's non-classroom specific staff that can help in. And as I mentioned earlier, I know VLAX has extended their options. I know they're available now, I think grades 4 through, well, at least 4 through 8 for us. And there may be some other options then that we could help parents get connected with. But our goal overall would be to have staff here support those students in their learning. We just don't know what that will look like yet.
Mr. Souza, if parents choose to use VLAX for the year for their students, would they then unenroll from Nottingham, or would we just support them doing that curriculum? Would they be enrolled in 2 different schools? How would that work?
That's a good question. I've actually reached out to VLAX to find out more about how that would work if students coming in and out. The quick response I got back from them is that once they're enrolled, they would prefer to keep them enrolled for the duration of that class. So we would have to see how that would work for us, but they're also working out shorter kind of units in VLAX that they could begin to use, kind of like what the high schools have done with competency renewal or competency makeups. So they can pick and choose what areas they need to work on.
Yeah, Dover High is has been doing that model. So I'm excited that they're expanding down.
Yeah, it's a lot of question marks still. And again, I think once we know that this is the path we're getting and how many students are interested in remote and what their levels are, grade levels are, I hope that we can have some staff who will take on that role to find out more information about how we can support them. And whether that's, again, there's several online resources now that have popped up, or if it is completely teacher driven through our staff, we'll figure that out when we have that data.
I had one other quick thing, just 2 things really kind of quick. I was reading some articles and I saw that St. Anselm's College is using a technology called iWave. And these are just little boxes apparently that don't require a lot of maintenance, that cost under $2,000 each. So they're somewhat economical. And you can put those into your ventilation systems and they filter out 90% of anything that's airborne, including a virus. So I don't know how many of those we would need, but I was curious about that technology for air quality for staff and students and administration. And then the other thing is, I've been watching some of the meetings and so forth from the other districts here and there. And I know that last week, Northwood had all their information and did a quick work session, and then they were gonna, come back again for their final. But they seem to be leaning toward a 2 to 4 week hybrid model. with then, if it works and things are moving along, they would try to get to a fully, everybody in. So that's just another thought.
Yeah, I agree. So that whole phase two, I've spoken with Jocelyn and looked at the Northwood proposal. I think again, phase two to phase three, I even, and looking at Portsmouth model as well, they're doing that low density to start with, ideally, and I'd love to be able to predict it, within a few weeks, if things go well, we'd be able to adapt. And even if it's not a complete shift, but anything that we could modify, talking about this as a dynamic plan from the get-go, to get more students in the building as much as possible. So one of the benefits Northwood has is space. So they actually have room in their building to divide their classrooms up to create smaller cohorts, more so than we do. So they could actually, one of those scenarios we put out first was, let's bring everybody back for 4 days and do 4 and 1. We can't bring everybody back in the building at once and maintain that 3 to 6 feet distance. We can't do social distancing. So that's certainly, that was a determining factor for the committee. But, if that's not something that is as important as we move forward, if we're noticing in the state and their recommendation changes, then we could bring everybody back. Like I said, we're trying to take whatever precautions we can, but we'll adapt as we go.
Yeah, I think it should always be our ultimate goal to be back fully whenever we can safely, with also the understanding that there's very likely going to be a time when we'll be fully remote. And maybe not, hopefully not, but that's always going to be a possibility, at least for a while. So I think we kind of have to keep both ends in mind. So I guess to move things along, I would like to make a motion that we accept the proposal with the understanding that the communication will be that this is our goal, with the hopes to determine some details in terms of who's coming back and who will be remote for staff and students, with the understanding that details will come after we have those numbers. And with the understanding that the entire plan could change after we get those numbers.
I'll second.
No, I guess I just want to make it clear to the community that we're going to ask you to make a commitment, and to staff, we're going to ask you to make a commitment based on this. And then if we can accommodate this with the numbers that we get, then that will be our ultimate goal. And that if the numbers we get deem that we need to change course and reevaluate, then we'll do that.
I'll second.
Yeah. And I also want to say that also with the understanding that we are going to continue to elicit feedback. I know that there was a request both from a staff member and from a board member that we elicit more feedback from the teachers. And so I think that should be a goal starting now. And maybe we all develop some specific questions we want to reach out. So we have a motion in a second. This is going to be part of the discussion. Maybe we all develop some specific questions we want to reach out to staff and ask, and we can get another survey out, or we can just say, hey, these are the questions we want answered, and ask for emails or whatever.
Well, I think, yeah.
Go ahead.
I think, as I mentioned originally, trying to get as much staff involved in this process to develop this view, knowing that we are going to need to get down and dirty to actually create some of these pieces and do that list that I included in the slide. I guess I would just balance what information the board needs to make them feel comfortable with the model versus how much input do we need in the nitty gritty to get down there. I think I'm trying to figure out, so as you shape those questions that you want, to really be thinking about that still at that surface level viewpoint, because until we have those PD days where the teachers can really roll their sleeves up and get in, they may not even have all the answers to what some of that might look like.
Right, and they may not have answers, but I think that part of what we want to understand is also their concerns. or their questions. So,
Absolutely.
okay, so we have a motion and a second. What else is there for discussion? Okay, so we will roll call. Dr. Shabda,
Yes.
Ms. Gordon,
Yes.
Ms. Levinson,
Because I don't agree with
Sue, can
the
you vote?
plan. I did vote. I said no.
Oh, I didn't hear you. Okay, I'm sorry. So, okay, can you just say it again? Because I think you got cut off and we didn't hear the whole thing.
I do not agree with the plan for how we will address remote. So I'm voting no.
Okay, thank you. And I will vote yes. So that's 3 in favor and 1 opposed. So that motion passes. And so I guess the next steps will be releasing the information and eliciting feedback and asking for commitments. And I think we need to work out the details of how that's going to work, but maybe we don't do that here. I just think I'm looking at the time and we've been here for a long time. So,
Christine, unfortunately, I have to go. Thank you so much for all of your work, guys. And I apologize for having to go.
Thank you, Ross.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
What's the board's pleasure in terms of making this all happen? Do you want another meeting to work out details and, or, you know, to decide how you want to survey the community? Do you want Chris and I to handle that with the rest of the committee? What are your thoughts?
I think that it's going to need to be presented to the community. And I think that I would participate in getting feedback from the teachers and staff members. But I think now that we have a model, we need to get it out there quickly.
I wonder if we release the information as soon as we're able, so Chris can tighten up whatever he needs to in the proposal and release it. And I wonder if we should plan to have either an open forum via Zoom on maybe Monday or Tuesday night so that people can comment or ask questions to clarify for themselves so they can make the decisions. Or if we should maybe schedule time in our August 5th meeting and say, if you want to comment, you can either email the board by August 5th or, you know, have a comment time August 5th and then ask for those final answers by the 7th. What do you guys think?
Is that a doable timeline?
I don't know. Chris, what do you think? Because I'm thinking if we're releasing the information via email and all on paper now, it gives people time to process and read. And then if at the beginning of the week they have a chance to get questions answered or clarified, then by the end of the week they make a decision. I don't know. I'm much further into this process than a lot of people because I've been so involved. So I feel ready to make a decision, but I don't know that everyone is that far along yet.
So I can get out a flyer, for lack of a better term, or an email or, you know, a document to parent and community members similar to what I gave to you folks earlier. I can just adapt that with some of the decisions that we've made here. You know, again, keeping it at that service level without getting too deep in the weeds. So at least parents will have some information as to the direction we're heading. And I can do that by Thursday of this week. I'm not going to be here Friday, and I am taking a couple days off next week. So my time over the next 2 weeks is I need to build in some vacation time as well. So I'm not sure what, you know, we're throwing out a lot of nebulous time periods as far as days. I'm not sure my commitment, but I don't want that to hold up any process either. I'll certainly do what I can, but I do know that getting information out to the public is a priority, and then getting feedback on whether or not people want to be remote or not, whether it be staff or students, is going to be vital to what the work we do looks like. So that time frame has to be honored somehow.
Okay, so I'm going to propose that we ask Chris to release the information, as he mentioned, by Thursday, that we allow the community to digest that over the weekend and the beginning of next week. And we set aside time during our August 5th meeting for comments and questions for clarification. And we plan our agenda accordingly. And that we either schedule, an end date for the commitment either on August 7th or August 10th. I mean, I think maybe giving it to August 10th would be fine. I'm not sure how much work would get done over the weekend anyway. But then that allows us all to look at that data and work out all of the details so that we can, commit to all of the details and get rolling. What does everyone think about that?
Sounds reasonable.
Chris, when you send out the information, can you also send out the information about the calendar and just noting that our start date will be that first week in September and that we'll be voting on the calendar also on August 5th?
Yes, absolutely.
Wonderful. Sue, what do you think?
Yeah, we need to get going. We need to move it forward. I'm disappointed, but we need to work together.
I hope that over the course of the next few weeks, you will be able to address a lot of your concerns. And because I share them, to be honest with you, I do. I just am kind of going with the process here. I think we're in a really hard spot where we need to give as many details as we can so people can make an educated decision, but without the educated decision that we're going to get, we just can't hammer out all the details. So it's just a hard spot.
Right, because ideally we'd want the kids back in the building 5 days a week.
Yeah, or all of the remote learning to be totally synchronous and
But
And maybe some of it will be.
Just I'm saying the remote learning we did last spring was not completely synchronous.
No.
I mean, and frankly, all good education is not completely synchronous in that sense that we want to be encouraging students to be doing project-based learning, to be developing and learning on their own, to have some of that natural discovery piece. So it is a balance. And I think that's, I guess I'm a little unclear as to what the plan might look like for changing some of these pieces. I am familiar, like I said, with Northwood's plan. It looks very similar to our plan, just because we might be calling it something different. And so if people come up with or have other plans that maybe we could look at too, and Susan, if you come across some ideas that you think can add to this, that we can build those in, I certainly think that's something that we could commit to. I don't want to think that we are stuck in this rut, that this is the plan and this is what we're going to do. We've been talking about being dynamic and shifting as we go. So I am committed to molding this and working with staff to make it something that is functional for us.
Yeah, it sounds good. I just, again, I think that I probably should have weighed in earlier, and we maybe should have, as a board, sort of thought about what it was that we were trying to achieve. But again, I know there's a lot of jargon in education, but my ultimate concerns for the welfare of our students, I got elected to not have a bunch of philosophies. I'm supposed to be following state law, and I'm supposed to be ensuring that we have the best possible education for our kids within the parameters of our budgets and so forth. And so I don't necessarily want to split hairs between synchronous and asynchronous and so forth, but my concern remains that when the children are outside remote, the structure that they will be receiving. And so that's just, and some of the inequities that could develop. And also I would like us to, if we can, investigate the I-Wave and what the cost would be in order to ensure an even healthier environment in our school.
Can we ask I just want to make sure that that happens, and I'm trying to determine who we want to direct that to.
I'll tell you what,
I can direct somebody to do that.
yeah.
And can we get that on the agenda for Wednesday as well?
I waive. What
Yeah.
was the district that was, well, Sue, just briefly restate the details.
There was an article in some of the local newspapers that St. Anselm College had purchased these units called iWave. I checked it out. It's a smaller company, but basically they filter out 90%, which, you know, you wonder if you still have 10% of a virus throughout your building, but they'll filter out 90% of your airborne pathogens, and the testing, they've been tested and they are effective.
Right. It's an ionization. As I mentioned earlier, I've been meeting on the phone with somebody about using UV rays as well to clarify our air, to build into our air handlers. So the iWave uses an ionization, kind of like a lot of home purifiers do. I can have Scott Brown begin to add that to the research level too, as much as the UV stuff. So if that works, we'll be looking at its effectiveness, its price points for installation, et cetera.
I just want to make another statement before we wrap up, in that I think that what we saw in our remote learning experience last spring is that it largely didn't work for a lot of people. And so I would expect that whatever element of remote learning we have going forward will be different.
Yeah, definitely. I think you're right on that. But again, I know I'm sounding fussy today and I don't mean to, but I think it's important that we all just have these conversations, and I do appreciate the work. And, you know, Christine, I know you put a lot of effort into this as well, and everybody on the committees, and I do appreciate that. And it's just part of the process to have different views. So, you know, it's all fine.
Absolutely. And I never take offense to us having different views. I think it's important part of the process. I also think I largely share your concerns and your view on this anyway. So, all right. Anything else before we wrap up? I think we have a good plan for going forward. And I think Wednesday night will largely be dedicated to hearing from the community and more discussion around these details. And we'll hit the ground running. But anything else? Sue, I think, is it just, oh no, I see Kelly. I was gonna say, I thought it was just Sue and I left. Anything else for Kelly or Sue?
No, thank you very much for all your work and for presenting.
You're welcome. And Chris, anything else from you?
No, thank you.
Nate, Scott?
I'm good.
I'm good. Thank you. Chris did a great job. And so did you.
Yeah, thank you, Chris, for all the work.
All right. Now, in a normal meeting, we do public comment at the beginning and the end. We did things a little different today. We did it in the beginning. Is everyone comfortable with closing the meeting, or do we feel like we should do another round of public comment before we close the meeting?
I think that I only see 3, so it might, these poor folks have hung out. Maybe we should hear.
Okay, we'll just do a quick round. And again, if people can keep their comments, we've been here for quite some time and I don't want to shut anybody down, but if we can keep our comments and questions just brief, if we could, that would be great. Let's do one quick round of public comment and then we'll close out.
Mr. Souza, I believe I gave you back the hosting responsibility so I can have a bio break. Do you want to give it back and I'll take it over?
I believe I already made you the host.
No, you made me the host. No,
somebody else is the host.
Who's on first? Nate, you're the host.
Okay, thank you. Okay, I'm going to go ahead and start with Christine.
No comments other than, again, thank you for all of your work and consideration and care for our children.
Thank you.
Thank you.
BSB.
No additional comments. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Diane.
No additional comments. Thank you so much, guys.
Thank you. Janice.
The only comment I have is again, to reiterate, thank you. Everybody's put so much work into this and it really shows.
Thank you. Lisa,
No comment. Thank you.
thank you. Chris? Okay. Last three digits, 773. I'm sorry, 773.
Hi, Michelle Janot. Been listening to all this discussion, and a couple of things that I still have concerns about, that I still think we need to work on, are the remote aspect of students that are at home, remote learning, and how that's going to be taken care of, and who. I have a lot of concerns about our teachers and burnout. I want everybody to keep that in mind. I think so far we've done a good job, but we need to keep that in mind, as well as just getting these kiddos back to school hopefully soon. Thank you.
I agree. Thank you.
Thank you. Last three digits, 573. Okay, I'm just going to go ahead and move on to the last person. Last two digits, 25.
Nope, I'm good. Thank you, everybody.
Thank you. Okay, Mrs. DeBrio, that is everyone.
Okay. I will accept a motion.
Motion to adjourn.
Thank you, Kelly.
A second.
All right, we have a motion and a second, and so we roll call out. Ms. Gordon?
Yes.
Levinson?
Yes.
Gabriel, yes. Thank you. It was a long meeting, but I think it was productive, and look forward to seeing you guys next week.
Thank you.
Thank you.